Ah, are you skipping classes as well? Yeah, they get pretty boring. I don't know why, but I'm just sitting down staring at the sky, thinking about stuff. Somehow, this isn't as boring. You know, at times like these, I wish I smoked. I'd look cooler and feel some kind of temporary happiness, but if I start smoking, I'd be scared of dying faster. I don't think it's worth it. I suppose that means I want to enjoy life as long as I can. Anyways, what have you been up to lately? You've been reading something? A visual novel? Subahibi? Oh, that segues perfectly into what I wanted to talk about. Hope you don't have anything to do for the next 3-ish hours. 0.0 Introduction. So, Subarishiki Hibi is a good visual novel. It's so good I'm not even going to try to sell it to you. I know I'm not the first person who's told you it's one of the best visual novels of all time and is genuinely life-changing. It's so good I thought the video I made for it years ago is bad, and Subahibi deserves better, which is why I'm revisiting it now. This time with the goal of creating the most in-depth analysis of this game that a human has ever done, at least the deepest I feel like going, which is still very deep. I know, like, any analysis or discussion of this game is only interpretations and there's no such thing as objective truth. Although, my interpretation includes doing as much research as I could, reading any and all material I could find of Subahibi on the internet from forums, blog posts, reviews, interviews, and not only that, but inserting my own original thoughts as someone who's read an introductory amount of philosophy because of Subahibi. I read what I could in my free time, but also from the perspective of an aspiring writer, which helped answer questions like why Subahibi's writing so good and why certain writing choices were made. It also helped with doffing the elusive veil Subahibi has, being this impenetrable, complex work of fiction when in actuality it was just written by a human being like me and you. Most importantly, this analysis was written by someone who has an immense passion for Subahibi. I made a feature-length YouTube video purely out of passion for Subahibi and changed the course of my life since it propelled my YouTube career, and even if I didn't do that, it got me through a bad time in my life, which I'll get into later. I found an appreciation for philosophy, which changed the way I think as well. I owe Subahibi a lot of things, and I sort of want to repay it in this video. The goal of this video is to hopefully make you, the viewer, understand Subahibi or at least share what I see in Subahibi. There are quite a few theories on the internet explaining the plot of Subahibi, which I'll merely mention later on, but I didn't want to limit myself by subscribing to any particular theory and just wanted to go off my own interpretation. Now that I've set up the goal of this video, I think it's important to describe the structure. I want the main message of Subahibi to be front and center, so I will discuss that first. Being the pursuit of happiness, the main motto, live happily. If you still get confused about many other aspects of Subahibi, as long as you understand this message, then I think you can safely say you understand its emotional core at least. Secondly, I wanted to go through the plot of Subahibi again, like my retrospective. I did say I want to have my videos be less recappy, but I think for a relatively obscure medium like visual novels, and especially Subahibi with its complex and lengthy narrative, it's best to have recaps anyway, so everyone's caught up. Even if you've played it before, it's easy to forget the details. I made sure the recap is as short and dense as they could be. But comparing my last video, there's a difference this time. I wanted to simulate what a reader would be thinking throughout the game by posing questions a reader might have, and then I'll just answer them. Hopefully this is a more intuitive way of understanding Subahibi chapter by chapter. And of course throughout I have my own opinions and thoughts for specific parts, but I will also pose them as questions to answer, so that this video is more structured. Some of the questions I pose in this section should already have answers baked into the visual novel. I'm just revealing them early so I could reveal the answers to the mystery while the mystery is happening instead of waiting for the answers at the end of the mystery like in the original plot. Of course I throw in some philosophical questions as well. Why not? These aren't as easy to answer and are more subjective about what the answers are, but there's never meant to be one, so I think I could be excused here. I will be extra pretentious during the philosophical questions, but you can't help being pretentious answering philosophy questions, so it is what it is. I also accidentally recreated the structure of Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, which is a nice bonus. One last thing about spoilers, and if I recommend reading Subahibi before watching this video. I mean, I don't know how it isn't obvious yet at this point, but go read Subahibi. I'll inevitably get into spoilers, but honestly, I don't mind if you haven't read Subahibi yet. If anything, this video interests you, just go ahead and read it and leave anytime you want and then come back. Okay, cool. One very last thing, instead of putting content warnings everywhere, I'm just gonna put one big general warning at the beginning. Subahibi is a dark visual novel. You're gonna expect themes of bullying, depression, drug use, death, including suicide and gore, sexual abuse of various kinds. I won't be discussing these topics in depth, but they will be apparent in the story, so be mindful of them. Now that I took like 5 minutes explaining what this video is even about, I can actually start the analysis. This will be a long video, so strap in, grab your popcorn, as we dive straight into the rabbit hole that is Subarishiki Hibi. 0.1 Development History. Okay, before even getting into the game itself, I think it's important to have a section about Subahibi's development history. It would just be helpful to know how the game was created, give some valuable background information on how Subahibi came to be, and I'm also just interested in development history and production details of anything I consume, so I hope you are too. So in 1998, Moonphase Company Limited was established as a video game company and released their debut work, Tsuinosora, 1 year later. Directed by Skaji and being inspired by the philosophy of Nietzsche, the game centers around the self-inflicted death of bully victim Zakura, and then Takuji using her death to propagate the prophecy about the end of the world. When it was released, there were a large audience of people who wanted to play it despite its technical issues, which prompted the studio to begin production of a remake. Skaji helmed the production again as producer, planner, and scenario writer, as well as artist, with the help of members from the team of Tsuinosora. And I spat out my coffee when I read this, but renowned mangaka Aka Akasaka, creator of Oshinoko and Kaguya-sama Love is War, worked on Subahibi's background art. I am serious. Subarishiki Hibi Furenzoku Sonzai was released on March 26, 2010 in Japan to some acclaim, winning the Bronze Moe Game 2010 awards, and also the tons of positive reviews the game has received after it was released. The game contained many references to a variety of philosophical and literary works, basing much of the game's philosophy from Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, but also from Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmund Rostand, Critique of Pure Reason by Kant, and many others. This was a challenge for the translation team. Herx, who had to cross-reference the English versions of the reference text, and Vav, who had to become familiar with Wittgenstein's work to properly translate Subahibi, although Skaji's easy-to-understand explanations of these works in-game absolutely helped, which is proven by the mainstream success of Subahibi, allowing the average reader to enjoy the game. In June 2012, the TL Wiki announced a fan translation project, which was later acquired by Frontwing, the visual novel studio, so it could be released officially. In August 2017, a limited physical release along with merchandise was funded by Kickstarter and reached its goal within a month with a total of $105,000 raised, and the game was finally released on Steam on August 30th, 2017. Because of Valve's prohibition of adult content, however, only the first chapter is available, and that is why if you get it on Steam, you need to get the full game patch from Frontwing's website. Even after Valve's censorship, there's a bestiality scene removed from Frontwing's patch for legal reasons, although you are not really missing much. Here is the one single CG that shows up for only like 3 minutes in-game. After the worldwide release, a full voice HD edition was released in 2018, only in Japan, with a new user interface and new voice acting, as well as an epilogue called Knockin on Heaven's Door. After that, the 10-year anniversary special edition was released on Christmas Day 2020, containing the full voice HD edition, the original Tsuinosora, and a remake of Tsuinosora with updated art, and a dramatically revised script 1.5 times longer than the original. And by the way, the footage I'm using for the rest of this video is from the full voice HD edition, just because it's more convenient for me, even though I do prefer the appearance of the text box in the original release. And that is basically Subahibi's development history up to this point. Actually, that's not true. Right on the day this video is uploaded, the 15th anniversary edition will be released, only in Japan, of course. It will have Tsuinosora the 2025 remake, Tsuinosora 1999, and the full voice HD edition of Subahibi, as well as the soundtrack, an audio CD, and a booklet. So that's pretty cool. The only other detail I found that I want to share would be during an AMA with Skaji, who was asked, how did you overcome difficulties when writing the script for Subahibi? And he answered, spirit and determination, which I think is just nice. 1.0, live happily. Alright, let's actually get into Subahibi. So, one phrase you hear from any fan of Subahibi is to live happily. This is from a scene near the end of the last major chapter in Jabberwocky 2, where Yuki proclaims the fact that in every living being, a command is inscribed into their hearts to live happily. It's a beautiful message and has become practically the motto of Subahibi, and I'd argue is its main message. But what does it mean? And why does it resonate with so many people? Maybe it seems obvious, but philosophy has always been about questioning the obvious. I think a good place to start is why I personally find the message so touching, which would mean I have to dive into my relationship with Subahibi. I think this is important because I believe many people who find Subahibi emotional should come from a similar background to me. Actually, I feel like giving a warning here. I will get into a deep personal story that gets quite emotional about failure and depression. So if you aren't up for it, you can skip to the next section. 1.1. What is my relationship with Subahibi? I should paint the picture as to how I found out about Subahibi. I was still in high school. I know, right? Horrible. Even worse, it was during the pandemic, so I didn't even have the liberty to hang out with the few friends I did have. To make it short, I hated my life at the time. My parents were on my ass trying to get me into a decent university, scolded me for failing exams and being behind my peers score-wise. I never cared about being competitive academically, but now my life depended on it to secure some kind of future, so I had to care. Once I did, I became my worst critic and hated myself for being so stupid. After national exam day, I didn't get accepted. I sent multiple applications to a couple of universities and failed those as well. That is until one day I did magically get accepted somewhere. No idea how, considering how dismal my scores were, but I'll take it. That happiness barely lasted since I was now in constant fear of leaving my parents for the first time, and when I did move, I didn't make any friends. I was horrible at studying and just stayed in my room all days of the week. Luckily, the Indonesian education system, and I'm from Indonesia, it was garbage, so I passed most classes with a decent score, but I definitely still suffered from the misery of being lonely. I can't communicate with these people. I'm so socially anxious and awkward, and no one had the same interests I did. I spent most of the time watching anime, playing games, and getting my shitty YouTube channel off the ground, which I've been trying to since I was like 10 years old. I sure as hell didn't want a career in system information's my major. It sounds boring, but my YouTube channel has never caught a big break in the past decade either. I honestly didn't know what I was living for at that point in time. So here is where Subahibi finally enters the picture. I was always interested in visual novels, but I didn't hang around any forums. I just watched YouTube videos and I noticed a pattern. The algorithm kept sending me songs from a certain visual novel, and some creators were mentioning this visual novel as well. It was Subahibi, obviously. I suppose the algorithm gods knew exactly what I needed at that time. I decided to play it, and once I did, I was obsessed with it. I sacrificed my sleep just so I could play it. There's a department-run event by the university meant to create unity and discipline among students to bring them together, but I don't care about any of that shit. I was just staring at the sky, thinking about Subahibi. My passion for the game was so strong, I wanted to make a video on it, but I didn't really know what I wanted to say about it. I mostly just recapped the game, calling it a retrospective, and people liked it, and realized my calling was long-form visual novel content because now a majority of my subscribers were from that video. Also, sorry if you liked that video, I do not. So I owe Subahibi my YouTube career basically, but of course I also owe it for filling my heart spiritually with the message to continue living happily despite my shitty university life, which by the way did not change much after reading Subahibi. I mostly just had more hope to live by making YouTube videos people might actually watch this time. But I think that is a good place to answer my next question. 1.2. Who is the intended audience for Subahibi? People who are lost in life, like me. I was just the hikikomori archetype, someone who could connect to Takagi, but it's not just that. The other demographic for Subahibi would be people who are suffering, the Zakuros of the world, the ones who question God's existence, this omnibenevolent being who is meant to protect them from harm but force them to suffer so much anyways. Both are definitely related. Takagi was bullied as well, and technically I was suffering from an uncaring society and mental problems. But anyways, it's clear human beings need purpose in their life and are unhappy when they cannot find their purpose or unable to fulfill their purpose. I'd say these people are very susceptible to conspiracies and cults that would fulfill that purpose in their hearts, but it's obviously wrong as they are delusions and not real. If I wasn't aware of how horrible conspiracies and cults were and was in the wrong place in the wrong time, I would definitely have been caught up by some pyramid scheme and start devoting my life to worshipping some narcissist. And in a way I avoided that by reading Subahibi. So I would say Subahibi's main audience is the victims of life suffering, and I think this transitions to the next question smoothly. 1.3. Why is Subahibi so dark? It is to properly portray how horrible life can get. To properly portray the lives of Subahibi's audience. I've seen comments online about how Subahibi didn't need to be nearly as dark as it should be. It might turn people away from how dark it is, and I'm sure everyone has their own tolerance levels, but I think Subahibi is tame compared to how truly horrible life can actually get. I was going to give examples here like Holocaust victims and the humanitarian crisis in Palestine, but the thing is, it's not really comparable since none of those people have access to a computer to play Subahibi, so really people like me are quite privileged even though we still feel like like we are suffering in life. So instead, I'm going to point to the rising hikikomori population in Japan. More than 1 million people there are withdrawing from social life, willingly confining themselves to their rooms, seeking extreme isolation from the rest of society. There can be many factors that contribute to becoming a hikikomori, these being societal factors, the highly competitive and rigid educational system, and the difficulty of securing a stable full-time job, both causing immense stress. Familial factors, a codependent mother-child relationship or absent father figure, and individual factors, a history of bullying, academic or social failures, difficulties in interpersonal relationships, or pre-existing mental health conditions. These result in hikikomori behavior, never leaving your room, being terminally online to escape from the troubles of your life. It also results in significant functional impairment or distress, mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, or development disorders, personality traits such as introversion, high sensitivity, and a strong fear of shame and failure. So I would say this population would fit best with Subahibi's demographic. You know, their lives suck and have access to a computer. I mentioned I never left my room in my story, and I struggled academically, so I understand what it's like to be one. It's a hopeless existence, running away from your responsibilities, constantly aware that you aren't fixing the problems in your life, wasting money and resources to keep your computer running and yourself fed, and also wasting your life away while also not having the bravery to pull the trigger. So my best answer to why Subahibi is so dark is to accurately reflect the hopeless existence of its intended audience. 1.4. How do we live happily? So despite all this suffering, how exactly can we live happily? I think just the mere fact that we can tell when life is going wrong means we should strive to find out how we can live life the right way. We can sense we are doing something wrong when we are unhappy, but when we are doing something right, we are happy. Of course, it is up to us to find out what doing right is. Oh, and yes, it is irresponsible of God to drop us onto this earth, allow us to suffer, but also set up hidden secret rules on how to be happy. I mean, you can read some self-help manual, but I have my own theory of what happiness is. To me, happiness is quote-unquote something beyond. You might think I'm being artistic with my words by calling happiness something beyond, but I'm trying to be as direct as possible. Calling something beyond is just the easiest way I can think of how to explain happiness. It is not physical and it's disconnected from yourself, trying to achieve something that is more than yourself. When people work on something beyond themselves, they can be happy. What exactly do I mean? Well, I learned this from connecting a lot of things that people find fulfilling, such as a fulfilling career. People devote their lives into how they improve the world and help others through their skill, something beyond themselves. People can be happy from starting a family, having a son or a daughter, taking care, raising them, teaching them what you learned in your life. Creating art can also create joy, expressing yourself, putting a part of yourself into something physical. Working on this physical thing is also beyond yourself. This even ties into Wittgenstein. In statement 6.41 of the TSL, the sense of the world must lie outside the world. To paraphrase, what happens in the world is accidental and value cannot be accidental, which is why it must lie outside the world. I'm replacing the words sense and value as happiness here, but I think it's related since we transform the world in some way to create value for us and therefore happiness. Besides Wittgenstein, the German psychologist Karl Gruss discovered that infants express happiness when they figure out they can cause predictable effects on the world, even if it doesn't benefit them. They express joy when simply moving a pencil around because they realize their hands are the thing causing the pencil to move it. I found this by reading Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber, by the way. So in a vague but hopefully tangible sense, creating an effect upon the world, doing something beyond yourself is what I would define as happiness. This would also deny other forms of fake happiness such as escapism, substances, or delusions in cults and other things, because the guilt of knowing that form of happiness not having an effect on the world makes it not true happiness. I think the reason why doing something beyond yourself makes us happy is because our consciousness, our minds, our souls are put into physical bodies, into a physical world, so rationally we should utilize this physical world in some way. It gives worth to your existence as well. But that's just a theory. My theory on happiness. I read a blog directly related to Subahibi's answer to finding happiness by the author Rel. I think it's a great short read analyzing Subahibi directly on how to be happy by focusing on how different characters in Subahibi achieve their happiness. It's worth its own read, but I'll link it in the description. But to shortly summarize it, characters like Zakuro who suffer have to actively fight to stop their suffering and gain a peaceful life, while characters like Tomasane who have peaceful lives, like in Jabberwocky, to stop fighting against their fate as a destroyer, just accept his reality and learn the value and the privileged, peaceful life he has. And those are just two answers on how happiness can be achieved. There could be happiness found in having social connections with people, or achieving an Aristotelian eudaimonic well-being, or whatever. There's so many resources, philosophy and theory out there on how to be happy. Just read about it. There's a lot of ways on how to be happy. You can hopefully achieve it through any number of these ways. 1.5. What is a wonderful everyday? Lastly, I just wanted to explore the meaning of the title, Subarishiki Hibi, or Wonderful Everyday. It is basically a synonym with a peaceful, happy life, a continuous state of happiness in life. It's the ideal state in life to be. No major things to be worried about, like getting bullied or paying debts or something else. Or even if you do encounter any troubles, it is the attitude that no matter what happens, you can live through it. So, I hope you're currently in a state of wonderful everyday, or if you're not, I hope you find yours soon. 2.0. Plot, retrospective, and analysis. Now that the main core of Subahibi was explained, we can get into the details. This section will be the majority of the video, so we're gonna be here for a while. So I hope you don't lose your patience as we dive into the next section, which is going into the plot and answering all the questions one might have while reading. Hopefully we can slay the monster, the Jabberwocky that is the mystery of Subahibi. 2.1. Prologue. We start with this legendary prologue, one I always remember having an impact. The beautiful scenery, Yuki's dialogue, and I can't forget that music. It really leaves an impression. Yuki is loafing around on a rooftop during a Friday afternoon, complaining about how static the sky is, the unchanging scenery. Why doesn't the sky change color every day of the week? Then Takuji approaches her, which surprises Yuki considering how meek he is in class. He doesn't want the sky to change so drastically every day, but if it did, maybe he could change too. Suddenly the scene shifts to someone talking to Yuki about the limit of the world, the edge of the sky. It reminds him of the hill, of sunflowers. And that's pretty much the prologue. Technically not much happens, but it sets the mood quite well when it introduces us to a couple of characters, hinting at Tomasane even. I won't linger on it too much since we have the entire rest of the visual novel to tackle, but I did want to bring up one question. 2.11. What is so special about the sky? Throughout Subahibi, the sky is a thematic concept brought up over and over again, used in multiple ways. Yuki is admiring the sky at the beginning. Takuji keeps talking about an end sky, and Ayana has a bizarre obsession with the sky. So I asked myself, what exactly makes the sky so special? How is it relevant to Subahibi? The following analysis, I just kind of let myself go and be as pretentious as I want without limiting myself, so be prepared for that. So the main question I wanted to answer was, what is so special about the sky? Or what makes the sky beautiful? Yuki is bored with how it doesn't change, but its beauty is in how consistent it is. You can count on it to always be above you, always shift from purple to blue to orange each day, no matter where you are on Earth. It's a comforting existence to never change. Second, it's an unescapable existence. It will follow you anywhere you are on Earth. You look to as far as the eye can see, and the sky is always there. It surrounds us completely. Thirdly, despite the sky's omnipresence, no one notices it, but it's always there. When I first played Subahibi, I did start staring at the sky and I had to confront its existence. Isn't it weird? No one can see the sky but me. Well, of course they can see the sky, but I felt at that moment I was the only one who could truly see it. Yuki in the beginning was suddenly reminded of God, but she couldn't understand why, but I think I analyzed why here. Because the characteristics of God and the characteristics of the sky are similar, at least the fact that they are both omnipresent. The concept of God has always been a much debated topic in the history of philosophy and is also present throughout Subahibi, so it fits. I think it's impressive Skaji was also able to make this connection between God and the sky, the implied beauty of the sky, and made it a prevalent theme in Subahibi even if it was done subconsciously. 2.2. DTRH1. DTRH1 has a very special place in Subahibi. First-time readers will be bored and weirded out by the mystery and the fan service, but second-time readers finally see the value in it, some even calling it their favorite chapter. No matter your opinion, the fact that opinions are so diverse should give an idea of just how hard to describe Subahibi is. I hope I can dispel some of that confusion in the following section. 2.20 DTRH1 Plot Recap. Yuki, our protagonist, meets up with her childhood friends Kagami and Tsukasa, who are sisters, and also yes, they are references to Lucky Star. But later in the afternoon, a doll falls on her head and she returns it to the girl who dropped it, Zakuro Takashima, who rambles on about this ritual she does, dropping a rabbit, something about the girl of the world, the girl of the sky, and the summer triangle. That night, Zakuro follows Yuki home and decides to become her maid to live with her. Kagami feels weird about this, so she wants to stay at Yuki's house as well, and they all have have a sleepover. They wake up late, so they don't even go to school. They just eat curry and watch each other's backs in the bath, and then the next day they get naked, play the king's game, and kiss each other, depending on who you choose. This will determine the ending of DTRH1. But tomorrow, the plot finally advances a bit. They try to find the summer triangle, the thing Zakuro was talking about, after being given equipment and access to the roof by Miu. Yuki meets Ayana on the rooftop. This is our first introduction to her, and all we know about her is that she is a very cryptic person. But they see Zakuro drop the doll again at a very specific time, which Ayana explains is a reflection of the same event in a different world. The next day, Zakuro and Yuki have a date at the amusement park, which makes Zakuro reminisce about positive memories. Later, they go on a mysterious boat ride called a spirit room. The CGs suddenly become real photos of a convenience store, a classroom, then a hospital, and then it just ends. It felt like they were ghosts going through this experience, and it was all very eerie. That night, they go into a bar. There's a beautiful moment where Yuki plays Eric Satie for Zakuro. And Kagami and Tsukasa's ending, they go see the summer triangle on the roof, and depending on who you choose, you get a H scene with Kagami or Tsukasa. Then Zakuro leaves town by train. But in Zakuro's ending, or the true ending, right after the bar scene the next day, everyone disappears. Yuki doesn't understand what's happening, finds Zakuro, and she wants to know where they are. Zakuro answers with a lecture on the inner world, what we can sense, and the outer world, what the world truly is. She's basically giving a lecture in phenomenology, which is the philosophical study of investigating the nature of subjective conscious experience while avoiding assumptions about the external world. There's a Wikipedia article about it if you're interested. Yuki and Zakuro lay by each other, then it turns into a big Night of the Galactic Railroad reference, and beyond that, all the mysteries of DTRH1 are revealed. Yuki figures out it wasn't a rabbit doll that was dropped, it was Zakuro herself who fell on top of Yuki. This is a dream world created by her for their happiness. Even if it was fake or short-lived, she was truly happy. Yuki forges ahead into the normal world. 2.21. Why is DTRH1 so gay? Before we even unravel what the meaning of DTRH1 is, let's address the elephant in the room. It was really gay. There's so much fan service in DTRH1, the plot was basically just trying to find the summer triangle, and every other scene is fan service. To be fair, the point of DTRH1 is meant to be a fun fantasy world created by Zakuro, so it makes sense why there's so much of it. But the genuine criticism I do have of Subahibi is that it will turn away some people who are impatient and have to read 5 hours of a bare bones plot filled with H scenes. I can attest since I wasn't really paying attention to anything the first time. That said, a reread, even without understanding Zakuro's intentions, is very fulfilling. I genuinely enjoyed the fan service the second time around. The dialogue is quite witty, funny, and doesn't take itself too seriously. Most of the time they were just trying to figure out what their own archetypes were, like the childhood friend or the maid or whatever, being aware of how indulgent it was. But beyond that, I also just want to discuss character dynamics. Now, I shall get way too analytical about this Yuri romance that no one asked for. Buckle up. DTRH1 is written like a generic tropey anime romance, but the one major difference is that the main protagonist is female. Yuki is clearly meant to be a dense anime protagonist who is subject to misunderstandings as seen in the lunch scene, and she doesn't pick up on Kagami or Tsukasa's feelings for her. While Tsukasa has feelings for Yuki, Kagami makes more of an impression by being aggressive and tsundere for her, so we'll just focus on Kagami. She is currently having a heteronormative nightmare. She always thought Yuki was a boy growing up, but now she's flustered that she grew up into a woman. Many scenes in DTRH1 are just gay shenanigans, washing each other's backs or being naked around each other, and Kagami being like, oh, we're both girls, this isn't meant to happen. The exact same excuse is used when something gay does happen. We're both girls, so being naked is fine, right? So it begs the question, are girls meant or not meant to be naked around each other? Kagami's logic is contradictory. What I'm getting at is just that Kagami is afraid of advancing her relationship with Yuki and changing a part of her identity. You know, thinking she was heterosexual her entire life, but now she's kissed a girl and likes it. She's just using the excuse about how girls are meant to act. But the lesson here, kids, is to be free and do what you think makes you happiest. Don't limit yourself based on society's norms. Be gay, do crimes. So yeah, I thought the Yuri was pretty good. Subscribe for more queer romance analysis. Look forward to more because I will be doing this again, but with Zakuro and Kimiko later on. So that was just, you know, some Yuri romance analysis, but I didn't really answer the question head on. DTRH1 is gay because Zakuro loved Yuki. Both are women, but Yuki was in Takuji's body in Looking Glass Insects, and this is Zakuro's dream world, so she wants it to be gay and happy. I'll explain more in depth later, but that is the answer. 2.22. What is the purpose of DTRH1? The The purpose of DTRH1 was to be a happy world created by Sakura for the sake of Yuki, who she fell on top of at the beginning of the route. That's why she mentions that even if it's a fake world, she is happy. Another thing to mention is that this world is basically Sakura coping with her suffering. In Looking Glass Insects, she falls in love with Yuki while she is in the body of Takuji. Sakura can finally interact with Yuki in her pure form in this world. It's why we visit the amusement park and the bar, because those are special memories she had with Yuki in Takuji's body in Looking Glass Insects. I think that's another reason why DTRH1 is very gay. Besides being a happy world, it's because Sakura's relationship with Takuji was secretly gay, since she was actually in love with Yuki. The gayness just turned up to 11 in DTRH1. So yeah, that was the purpose of DTRH1. 2.23, what does the girl of the world and the girl of the sky mean? Let's dive into the specific cryptic words Sakura uses in DTRH1. There's a lot of jargon about the girl of the world not meant to be here and should return to the sky. I'm not gonna analyze every line, but basically it just means Yuki is the girl of the world because the girl of the sky fell on her, who is Sakura. Let's explain some of her other weird behavior. She's dropping rabbit dolls because it is meant to simulate people jumping off a building. She has multiple dolls to represent herself, Shiroyama, who's a bully that just happened to fall off the roof before she did, those girls who she jumped with, and Senagawa, the teacher. She talks about the beginning and the end of the sky, which is meant to be her finding where the illusionary world ends and where the real world begins. This is a Wittgenstein reference, trying to find the limit of the world. And lastly, the summer triangle, which I think is just an arbitrary date and time, so the illusionary world ends. It also allows some poetic writing about astrology. 2.24, what do these specific times and dates mean? So, 3 dates come up in DTRH1 that are quite mysterious why they were given attention. First is July 12, 2012, 10:44 p.m. when we first meet Sakura. At this time, she releases a mass text message. As Ayana explains, these reflect time in the real world, so we just have to find when something similar happens in the real world. This date is referencing to when Takuji uses Sakura's phone to send a mass text message to everyone on the message boards, making everyone think they are cursed by Sakura's ghost and give the world-ending prediction on the 20th of July. The second date was July 16th, 2012, 5:58 p.m., which I think is when Senagawa jumps off. It's why she drops the rabbit at the exact same time. And lastly, some potato chips in the Spirit Room gondola has the expiry date of July 20th, 1999. The only thing I can think of is this is a reference to the end of the world prediction during Tsui no Sora. 2.25, what is the Spirit Room gondola ride? Speaking of the Spirit Room, what was that? It was a creepy experience going through it the first time, but it seems to have a lot of meaning, especially since it gets mentioned during End Sky 2. On the surface, it doesn't seem to have a lot of meaning. Sakura and Yuki go through a creepy gondola ride across a bunch of rooms, from a convenience store, an apartment, a classroom, a hospital, and then the sky. These places are completely deserted and also connected by stairways and elevators, while somehow still being on a gondola. We hear Yuki and Sakura's reactions, who also don't seem to understand what the Spirit Room is. But instead of trying to find specific details to focus on, would be better to look at the big picture. Think about the kinds of places we visit in the Spirit Room. A convenience store, an apartment, a classroom. These are familiar places a person would spend a lot of their time, at least in a consumer society, as Yuki mentions. I think it's meant to paint the picture of an everyday life. The usage of real photographs instead of art adds to this meaning. Yuki says as well, we look into these people's lifestyles, amputated and preserved in a jar. Then, at the end, the final abode room is a hospital, which is where most people die. The next thing they see is they zoom into the hospital bed and then into the sky, called the end sky, which we can assume represents death. So, my best current theory of what the Spirit Room is a ride simulating a common everyday life and then death. Yuki also likens this experience to being like a ghost, observing these empty rooms and other people's lifestyles, which is why it's called the Spirit Room. The riders are the spirits. I'm still confused about the significance of the Spirit Room, even if that was the case, but I think we get the clue right before DTRH1 ends. After Sakura disappears and Yuki is in this white void, she is preparing to enter the real world. The last thing she says is she's done being a ghost. For the first time reader, we can assume she stops being in the illusory world and into the world of DTRH2, but we also hear the words, "This is the second time I had to walk this road." This could mean that this is a message for the reader who is rereading DTRH1. For a second time reader, assuming that they stop reading after DTRH1, then the words "I was done being a ghost" could mean that the reader themselves stop observing reality like as a ghost in the spirit room and start participating in reality. So the spirit room was a representation of a common everyday life up until death, and Subahibi uses this representation for the reader to wake up and go back to reality, go outside and touch some grass. At least that's my best theory. There might be something missing, but if anyone has any better ideas, that's what comments are for. 2.26. Where or when is DTRH1 in relation to the rest of the story? It's hard to pinpoint exactly how DTRH1 is placed in relation to the rest of the story. Chronologically, it's clear it is after Looking Glass Insects, at least, since Sakura reminisces her time with Yuki, and we know it should be some kind of fictional world created by Sakura. This gives off the vibe that DTRH1 is in some kind of purgatory or afterlife. Maybe you can think of it as DTRH1 is a world that is just tangentially related to the rest of the story. There is a somewhat popular theory that uses a layered world structure to Subahibi by someone called Mayuchi. Even though I don't agree with everything about that theory, I do think this is an invaluable tool to think about how Subahibi's chapters relate to each other. Basically, DTRH1 and End Sky take place on a higher level or outer world, while every other chapter takes place in the inner world. This distinction is made because DTRH1 and End Sky 2 are aware of the rest of the story, so it seems like they are above it. There's some confusing parts not explained yet. Specifically, at certain times flashes of a hospital bed appear. Now, Mayuchi's explanation leads to thinking Aina is responsible for creating the structure, and she is a schizophrenic hospital patient who dreamed everything up. It implies Aina did not create this world on purpose, but I like to think Subahibi's world was created on purpose and has authorial intent. I prefer to think Aina created this world out of boredom at school and gets called by her friend Miyu at the very end instead of being in a hospital bed. That said, those flashes of a hospital bed still remain a mystery. I still think that blog post is a fascinating read that uses an intuitive way to understand Subahibi's complex story. I still highly recommend reading it, even though I disagree with some nitpicky things. 2.3. DTRH2. DTRH2, the quote-unquote real beginning of Subahibi. Our detective sleuth Yuki uncovers a cult conspiracy that prophesizes the end of the world. Here's where it actually gets interesting for a first-time reader. There's drama, stakes, and a mystery going on. So, let's go down the rabbit hole. 2.30. DTRH2 Plot Recap. The story starts with Yuki pondering about the unnoticed, slow and gradual change a person goes through their life on the train, then gets kissed by Sakura for no discernible reason. Yuki spends a lot of time with the Wakatsuki sisters, then at school finally hears the news that Sakura jumped off a building. She talks to Aina for a bit about some cryptic stuff, then she starts getting migraines and Takuji suddenly appears, who just runs away, intimidated by her. In class she talks about the web bot project and how it can predict the future using keywords on the internet, this time predicting the world is going to end on the 20th of July. We get a rooftop lunch date with the sisters, then Yuki asks a classmate to get invited onto the school's message boards where all the rumors at school come from and circulate. We meet Yasuko, underrated character by the way, who shows her this disturbing messages she got from Sakura's phone. Then Yuki investigates Sakura's desk that has a sticky, slimy substance inside of it. I wonder what that could be. But she dusts it for fingerprints and sees the same prophecy of the end of the world on that desk. She then meets Takuji again, but he's a lot more confident and mean this time, who in as many words as possible calls Yuki stupid. The next day, Takuji delivers his speech about how death is being forgotten in society and gives predictions that a death will happen soon. That night, she looks around on the school forums. Everyone's scared about Sakura's curse since they keep getting texts from her, and she googles about the web bot project and finds an address, so she heads there tomorrow and then meets Sasaki, Takuji's little sister, who explains the disbanded cult organization, the White Lotus Association, but their mother, Kotomi, keeps the webbot project website running anyways. In the afternoon, I meet Kimika, fuck yeah. Anywho, Senegal, the teacher, grabs Yuki's leg and begs for help. She just fell off a building. Then Kimika comes to nab the teacher's phone. That night, Yuki scours the message boards again and everyone is getting scared. Takuji's prediction came true. At this point, no one doubts Takuji is the savior. The day after, Yuki talks with the teacher, Asumi, about how the public and the school deals with the recent deaths. They're covering up the fact Sakura was bullied and say that Senegal's death was an accident. Asumi was holding on Senegal's cell phone for some reason, so Yuki takes it home and realizes Takuji must have manipulated Senegal into going off the roof. Takuji was sending messages from Sakura's phone, guilting and scaring Senegal for not doing anything, while Sakura was being bullied. So Takuji prompted her to take a doll from the edge of the rooftop to make her fall from being beyond the railing. And then, something really mysterious happens. She decides to call Sakura's phone and the phone starts ringing in Yuki's room. Sakura's phone is right there. After this, a black figure scares Yuki and she faints. Talks to Aina, discouraged and scared to solve the mystery, but gets a new hint after examining Sakura's phone. Takuji has touched the phone. Yuki decides to confront Takuji by going into his hideout, wondering why he kept appearing near the pool, so she goes into the manhole and finds Kagami's disfigured body. She brings her home as they talk about a childhood memory where she brings Kagami home on her back, just like this. Another mindfuck moment. The Wakatsuki household just has an old lady in it. Kagami turns into a rabbit doll and Tsukasa into the black figure. Yuki passes out again. Right after this, she talks to Aina again, who leads her to the End sky and meets Takuji, who's just about to jump off. Yuki starts explaining how exactly Takuji did his miracles. He simply had Zakuro's phone and used it to send mass text messages to incite fear and hysteria to the entire school. He also orchestrated Sunagawa's death. The only mystery now is, what did Takuji do to Yuki? What caused her hallucinations of the black figure and migraines? Takuji claims he did nothing to her. Ayana appears and says, "It's nothing. Mamiya-kun just jumped off." So yeah, that was DTRH2, a fun, engaging mystery that oversees the cult conspiracy from the view of an outsider, which I think is a much needed perspective. This chapter was like the surface of the rabbit hole before diving into how Takuji orchestrated everything in the next chapter. But there are still quite a few unanswered questions, which I'll get into right now. 2.31. What is the End Sky? It's basically just another name for the world-ending event on the 20th of July. It's called the End Sky because it's the name of the sky when the world ends. Nothing more, really. Just in case if anyone was still confused. 2.32. What is the Web Bot Project? There's a long section dedicated to explaining the theory behind the Web Bot Project about the Jungian collective unconscious, which culminates on the internet being able to accurately predict the future when that many people collaborate. I focused on this topic because it turns out the Web Bot Project is actually a real thing. It has a website and a Wikipedia page. But I'm not going into the theory here because it's just conspiratorial stuff. It also reeks of pseudoscience. They keep the technology secret, but you have to pay to view the predictions. They claim to have predicted the 2004 tsunami and Hurricane Katrina after the fact they happened and predicted the world will end in December 2012, among other disasters, but obviously none of them came true. So to reiterate the question, what is the Web Bot Project? Nothing worth taking seriously. 2.33. What does the dissociative identity disorder explain here? So I did have many questions during DTRH2, some that get answered by the end of the chapter, but many more unanswered. The answered questions were mostly just about how Takuji was able to manipulate everything behind the scenes, orchestrate the teacher's death, and cause this hysteria. Yuki explains that all at the end of the chapter. But that doesn't explain any of the mysterious stuff that happened to Yuki. I would say most of these mysteries get solved by the dissociative identity disorder between three main characters, Yuki, Takuji, and Tomasane. I'll dive into it much more in Jabberwocky, but the idea is what I would call the gimmick of Subahibi, the main core behind its mystery. As I said, I made a list of questions, but I thought it would be just better to answer as one question since they all had the same answer. DID. Let's start off with the beginning of the route. 2.331. Why did Zakuro kiss Yuki? Because in Zakuro's perspective, Yuki looks like Takuji, who she fell in love with in a chapter that happened chronologically before this one, being Looking Glass Insect. In a writing perspective, I think it gives character to Zakuro as well, since we get a glimpse of her before we hear that she dies. 2.332. Who are the Wakatsuki sisters? They felt like full-fledged characters in DTRH1 and the beginning of DTRH2, so it feels weird they don't appear in the latter half of DTRH2 until they transform into a rabbit and some black figure. Basically, Kagami is a rabbit doll and Tsukasa is Sasaki, Takuji's little sister. Why? Because Takuji, who is one of the personalities in this DID situation, has trauma related to her little sister. I will dive deeper into this, and it's my own invention. 2.33. What caused Yuki's headaches? I think this only occurs whenever Takuji appears. He has a special relationship with Yuki since they both share the same body. In Jabberwocky, it's explained like characters tune into different channels so they can meet in their minds. I guess that's why it has a staticky effect to it. 2.334. What were those black figures? This is the main hallucination Yuki has. Yuki gets jump scared by a black figure twice, then passes out. In which Dreamt it, we figure out it's Sasaki. In Yuki's mind, the way it was explained was that basically Sasaki is out of place. She does not expect Sasaki to be near or inside her house at that point in time, so her mind turns her into this thing. Although Yuki does expect her to be at the address for the Web Bot Project because Takuji must be related to that website, which is why Yuki can see her then. 2.335. Why is Yuki so invested in this mystery? Yuki questions herself, and why does she care about solving this mystery? She does not have any good reason to care. Maybe if she has the mindset that this can be solved, she wouldn't be washed up by the hysteria. But we do know she personally has a close connection with Mamiya Takuji since they're both personalities of the DID, she just doesn't know about it. That's probably why she subconsciously wants to solve this mystery, because she has an unaware but real relationship with the cause of the mystery, the cult leader. 2.34. What was that ending? One last thing about DTRH2, the ending was super messed up. I just want to appreciate the visual novel presentation. This ending was genuinely terrifying, the way the text malforms into specific shapes and spams the same thing over and over again. It felt like the game was possessed. That on top of this bloody moon, a smiling Aina, and a red sky. The horror is spot on. Beyond that is an excerpt from maybe Tomasane about the perspective standing at the limit of the world. There are lines about not being able to see the world others see, parallel universes that never cross, but he questions if that really is the case. It's basically saying DTRH2 is seen through Yuki's perspective, but we see the perspective from someone else in a different chapter. I think it's hinting we actually can see the world others see, since Subahibi is written to have different perspectives in other chapters. Speaking of which, we'll be moving to another perspective, Mamiya Takuji, the cult leader who arguably created this whole mystery. 2.4. It's my own invention. This chapter is the wackiest, craziest, most Subahibi can get. We get to see the cult conspiracy unravel through the eyes of the one who orchestrated it all, Mamiya Takuji. How exactly did he ascend to become the savior? Let's see. 2.40. It's my own invention plot recap. 2.401. True route. Takuji's bringing home books from his house over to his hideout in the school's pool. It's got everything he needs. All his anime merch, shelves for his manga, a bed, lights, his laptop, and even an internet connection. He's being an otaku partly to rebel against his strict mother who did not allow this stuff. While bringing more manga over, he's interrupted by Tomasane, who bullies him by burning his manga, then forcing him to pay for lighter fluid, 50,000 yen. Then she meets Zakuro, who saw the fire. Takuji claims he burned it because it bored him, but Zakuro had that manga as well. Takuji had his hopes up since a girl had similar interests to him, but is reminded of his awful past with women, tricking and bullying him. He starts being a dick and distrusts her. So some bullies hear their conversation and Takuji brings Zakuro over to his secret hideout. She's impressed he has a place like this, but Takuji wants to share secrets, so it's fair. Depending if Takuji gives into his delusions, Zakuro's secret is that she's an exhibitionist who masturbates often and tells a story of shoving a vibrator up there on a crowded train. Of course, that story isn't true. Her real secret is she draws manga, which disappoints him. Later though, Takuji shows off his hideout to Zakuro. She used to be interested in this hideout, but is disgusted by Takuji's behavior and room, filled with light novels and jars of piss, so she leaves. He gets bouts of sleepiness, which attacks him, and when he wakes up, he checks the school message boards, which he manages. The next day, he meets with the Wakatsuki sisters. Kagami is being generally aggressive toward him and somehow keeps reading his mind. Then Tsukasa points at a rabbit doll. Their brother used to buy a doll like that for her, and it was the happiest moment in her life. Wonder what's the significance here? He goes to the hideout again, sees Zakuro, but she leaves immediately. He also sees on the message boards Megyu and Satoko are bullying Zakuro. He feels bad for her and wants to meet her again. The next day, however, he stumbles onto Tomasane instead, who beats him up for not bringing the 50,000 yen and also sees Tomasane be aggressive toward the other bullies as well. This reminds Takuji of the time Tomasane first appeared, which is the vomit-inducing H scene where Takuji steals Zakuro's uniform, is forced to wear it, and gives a blowjob to his bullies. Tomasane then appears out of nowhere to beat them up senseless. The next day, he goes out to buy some light novels and spends time on the roof but sees a strange sight. Yuki and Zakuro kissing? Zakuro is acting strange too. Curious and apathetic towards Zakuro, he follows her but sees a terrible sight. 3 corpses who seem to have fell from a building. He decides to take a picture to record the moment but is too traumatized to do anything else. He goes back to his hideout but the memory haunts him. He imagines how the women died in the anime he watched and Zakuro's corpse jump scares him. The next day he goes into class and can feel the fear and paranoia around the classroom. He feels hatred toward them as well, maybe for letting Zakuro die and doing nothing about it. I don't really know how to describe the visuals of this scene, so I'll just show it. A sharp and accurate depiction of anxiety if I've ever seen one. He goes into Zakuro's classroom and approaches her desk. You know what happens next. This happens because Takuji is so delusional he pretends Zakuro is in love with him and he decides he will be the one to avenge her since no one cared about her when she was alive. And this act, I don't know, consummates their relationship. He finally reads the prediction of the end of the world on Zakuro's desk and it reminds him of her mother, who had a similar prediction. But how is this possible? Why are they related? He doesn't really know. Even though he hated his mother, seeing the prediction again on Zakuro's table, maybe she was right all along. Takuji thinks about how bad of a child he is. He pretended to be a good child, reading books and listening to classical music when she's around, but he really just masturbates the rest of the time. Relatable. His life is so full of masturbation and wasting time, and it motivates him to doing something. Anyways, he meets Yuki for the first time, who appears by headache and static sound. Then he meets Ayano, who makes a fool out of him. She discusses how Takuji has the fear of death. Zakuro's death replays in his mind. It drives him crazy. Strange ghosts start chasing him, and Zakuro's corpse jump scares him again. He wakes up to his anime waifu, Maho Shoujo Riruru, who starts talking to him from his scribble on the wall. It gets really trippy with all this propositional logic, then she shows him a journey of 100 million years, which eventually convinces him he's the savior. As savior, his goal is to continue the destiny his mother gave him, and to return everyone to the sky. aka kill everyone for the sake of Zakuro, who he has this twisted love for. He starts looking through Zakuro's phone, which he got from Zakuro's corpse, and sees messages about meeting with 2 other girls about doing some ritual, basically. We get even more backstory in Zakuro, how she used to interact with her bullies, Megu, Satoko, and Kimika as well, culminating in an incident where she jumps off a building to catch a rabbit doll phone keychain. Takuji, now knowing what Zakuro went through and empathizes with her more, decides to manipulate the whole school to die for her sake by saying the world will end. He gets the idea to manipulate them since he has Zakuro's phone and sends cursed-looking mass text messages counting down to the end of the world. This should incite fear, the idea that Zakuro's ghost is haunting everyone to an already scared crowd. Anyways, the next day, everyone receives a mass text message and are horrified. Tomasane appears, but Takuji is acting different this time, so they battle it out on the rooftop, and guess what? Takuji wins. He acts cocky towards Yuki as well. He tries to act cocky toward Aina, but she still has the upper hand. Aina still knows what he fears. Takuji is scared of Aina, but Ruru comforts him, saying she won't do anything to him. He goes through the message boards again, and the next day in class starts arguing with Kagami as Aina is doing this smug face while knowing Takuji is hiding something from himself. He argues with the teacher, bashes him on the head with a vase, and lectures about death while spouting his prediction that someone will die soon. Right after this, he meets with a depressive, seemingly insane girl, Kimika, one of Zakuro's bullies. The way she approached Takuji, she seemed like she had the intent to kill, but instead listened to him first. Takuji tried scaring her with the cursed messages and his death prediction, but she doesn't react how he expects her to. She's only pretending to be scared of Zakuro's curse and decides to be obedient toward Takuji, calling him her savior. Takuji reveals Senagawa will die tomorrow, so he orders Kimika to monitor every move until then. He then sets up the messages that will metaphorically and literally push her over the edge. The next couple of scenes are really trippy. Riru orders him to go to the roof, and on the way he sees a bunch of ghosts and then Shiroyama's corpse. On the roof, a magical girl battle between what he calls the Holy Surge and the Black Surge, consisting of Mahou Shoujo Rirurus fighting in the sky, causing a lot of bloodshed. He uses some of the fallen corpse parts to reassemble a human body. This is kind of like a B plot that will be continued later. Tomorrow, Kimika gathers the girls up to meet with the savior and explains Senagawa will die, since Zakuro resents her the most. Then he meets a crude drawing of Riruru because his conduit to bring her alive was just his scribbles on the wall. That afternoon, the girls come back and witness Senagawa's death. Yasuko now meets Takuji, but she's confused since she met Yuki and DTRH2 acted very differently. In Takuji's head, he reasons he has an imposter running around. He also talks about the Wakatsuki sisters, and no one knows what he is talking about. He deduces this must be the work of the Black Surge. He orders the girls to get drugs and a Mahou Shoujo Riru poster, and when they come back, they meet Natsumi, who is willing to join Takuji's cult. But after a life of teaching, aka indoctrinating children, she has to prove her obedience by raping her father, who inspired her to be a teacher in the first place. Okay. After that, she goes on some crazed bender where she steals a bike from an old lady and pees while riding on it, then masturbates in public. Takuji didn't tell her to do any of that and forces her to be a toilet. Megu and Satoko come back with drugs and an injured Nishimura who Takuji heals somehow. Anywho, now that he has a Riruru poster, a realistic depiction of Riruru will appear on the roof, who turns out to be a hermaphrodite and has sex with her. I don't know why. He meets a creepy version of God as well. Then wakes up next to Kimika, finally a sight for sore eyes. Nishimura is dying while everyone is on drugs and having sex. That afternoon, he comes back to the roof and meets Aina, then humiliates her for being a futo while having sex with her, humping at almost the speed of sound, which will bring down the building, but of course that was just a delusion, and she explains the concept of the creator, destroy, and harmonizer as Takuji, Tomasani, and Yuki respectively. Then meets with Tomasani, who challenges him to another fight, who boasts about courage. Then Takuji just beats him. For some reason, the Wakatsuki sisters appear and Kagami is pissing him off, so he orders the followers to deflower her. Somehow Kagami is unfazed by this, so Takuji decides to crucify her. After this, right before the end of the world, Takuji and Kimika decide to not die versions, I guess. They go up to the roof and watch the end sky. Everyone's on drugs and having fun while Kimika hypes them up. Takuji meets with Yuki and then jumps off. That's the end of the true route. 2.402 Kimika route. I'll discuss the true route in a bit, but it's not over yet. We haven't gone through Kimika's route, where Takuji doesn't give into his delusions with Sakura. There isn't that much of a difference with the original route, besides a few extra scenes with Kimika. We get to know more about her. The scene gets extended. It's absolutely adorable. She repeats the same information over and over, which is both hilarious and trippy. We also see the scene where Takuji lectures on Norse mythology while using Kimika as a chair. Then the magical scene where she recites Emily Dickinson's poem about the brain being the weight of God with fireworks and dancing cows in space. Drugs are very fun, do drugs. But the final scene with her is most important, right before she jumps off. She explains her motive as to why she became Takuji's servant. Takuji thought she was scared of Zakuro's curse as well, but it wasn't that at all. Kimika felt incredible guilt for Zakuro's death and not being able to do anything for her, so when she heard of Takuji planning to kill everyone for Zakuro's sake, she had the exact same desire as Takuji and decides to help him as best she could. Then they both jump off together. And that's the end of It's My Own Invention. That recap went on way longer than I wanted it to, but I did want to show everything major that happened, and even then I only scratched the surface on most of the absolutely insane scenes. Subahibi's writing is so tight and dense, the recap had to be that lengthy. I mean, it could be shorter, but I'd be missing out a lot of stuff. This route is a wild ride you can't get anywhere else besides Subahibi, so let's waste no time and get into analyzing it. 2.41. Why am I literally Takuji? The very first thing I want to discuss is just how much I relate to Takuji. I'm sure many do, and I just want to make it obvious. I might not be completely delusional and paranoid, but he's still incredibly accurate. Let me go through the list. First, his introduction. The CG of him just walking in the sun gives off such a great first impression because anyone who spends way too much time in their room will despise the sun. It will generally feel like it is just beating down on you wherever you go compared to a nice, dark, air-conditioned room. Second, his strict mother. I feel any depressed, lonely person will always have a complicated, usually unhealthy relationship with their parents because they are the only people any human would automatically have a close relationship with or should have. Same with mine, who I mentioned heavily cared what my grades were, which anchored me to an extent I couldn't describe. Speaking of hating women and being an incel, I never understood how human relationships worked, so seeing anyone with a significant other made me confused. Like, how is that even possible? For Takuji, he had a bad experience with girls before, but I never really did. I just never understood how advancing a relationship until becoming a boyfriend and girlfriends worked. The next point, hating everyone in general. That was definitely me in middle school. I don't remember much, but I definitely just hated everyone around me for not understanding me or having the same interests. I think Takuji pretty much has the same attitude for everyone around him. Lastly, I would say he has the will to turn this hatred into revenge through subtle trickery and becoming the savior. In real life, most would probably become school shooters. Yes, I think Takuji is a nod to school shooters, and I would say I've been dangerously close to that multiple times. Not, meticulously planned and buy a gun, but I relate in the dangerous mindset that human lives don't matter and they don't deserve to live if they treated me this badly. I obviously don't think that anymore, but the way Takuji manipulates people, I'm sure he does think that way. Oh, and I also forgot, he masturbates all the time. It's embarrassing to admit, but yeah, that's me. On days where I had nothing to do, I used to do it like 5 times a day. It was very depressing. So yeah, I love Takuji. He's an icon. Skaji got his character spot on. 2.42. What is Takuji hiding from himself? So there are 2 scenes in It's My Own Invention where one word keeps getting bleeped out right before Takuji does his big speech. He gets confronted by Kagami and then Aina, who keeps saying he is hiding something from himself. Then the final confrontation with Tamasane, he seems to keep mentioning someone's name. Someone who Takuji cared a lot about, but the name just doesn't reach him because he's subconsciously too scared to face his past. Who could this person be? Well, it's Asaki, his little sister. But why is he scared of admitting her existence? Well, I don't know exactly why, but it's probably related to the incident. This will be much clearer after Jabberwocky, but basically, in their childhood, Takuji wanted to get rid of her little sister because their mother birthed twins by accident. He was supposed to be the one and only savior. After the incident where they do try to kill her, Takuji dies, but maybe possesses Tomasane's body, and then tries to forget about Hasaki to protect her from himself. I think that is how it happened. I'm just gonna assume he doesn't want to remember Hasaki because of traumatic experiences related to her. At the present, Takuji's brain starts replacing Hasaki's physical appearance with the Watsukatsuki sisters, and I just want to mention what Aina says that is only clear in hindsight. She's currently talking about Kagami in this scene where he says Takuji is hiding something from himself. Quote, "Once the answer is found, you don't exist anymore. It's a boring answer once you remove the mystery. If you reach the end, you might see it too, but what could an existence before existence hope to see?" Honestly, rereading Subahibi gave me the joy to finally understand these lines and how it's been built up this whole time. It is really satisfying to know what she's talking about. 2.43. What did the hallucinations mean? So, Takuji is, insane. He is subject to quite a many hallucinations. I would classify them into 2 types of hallucinations. One is the over-the-top savior-related delusions that are obviously not possible in reality, though the savior-related ones are obviously fake and sometimes just extreme visions of what he wishes to happen. So the second type of hallucination is basically just to make sense of the DID situation. First is the Wakatsuki sisters to cover up Hasaki, that's because of his past. It is also why those sisters can read his mind, because they are a figment of his mind, so they can access it. Tomasane is also technically a hallucination, Yuki as well. Whenever any of these characters appear, there's usually a static sound followed by headaches. That's because they're all characters created out of his mind. So yeah, that was the 2 types of hallucination he experienced and sort of why they happened. 2.44. Who is Kimika? What are her motives? Why is she so adorable? I just cannot make this video without dedicating an entire section to Kimika. She's the one I keep forgetting about, because Subahibi becomes more about Tomasane with Yuki and Asaki at the end, but Kimika no doubt carried It's My Own Invention and Looking Glass Insects, the only ray of sunshine in both routes. We meet her after Takuji's big speech. She overhears it and is interested. She pretends to follow Takuji out of fear at first, then becomes more eccentric later on. We don't know where she came from or what her motives are at first, so let's answer answer both. Halfway through Looking Glass Insect, she's fighting some bullies to protect Zakuro, and then just disappears from that point onward. We can assume she wins the fight, but doesn't interact with Zakuro after that point. A few days later, she must have heard Takuji's speech that mentioned Zakuro's death in it, and they had similar goals, so she wanted in on it. So I suppose that's where she came from, but what are her goals? Throughout the route, she was incredibly loyal toward Takuji. Too loyal at times, but at the same time, she also wouldn't accept certain orders like having sex with strangers. So she has her own motives when it comes to following Takuji, and isn't just blindly following his orders either. We knew she was involved in Zakuro's bullies, and her motives really only get explained at the end of her route. She feels incredible guilt for what happened to Zakuro. She couldn't save her from the bullies and felt like she betrayed her, but everyone wronged Zakuro. Her bullies, the people who didn't stop the bullying, are guilty as well. So the whole school, basically. When she heard Takuji was planning to return everyone to the sky, aka kill everyone, she wanted to do that, but only Takuji had enough influence to actually do it, so she followed him. So that explains her motives, but why is she so goddamn adorable? First, I've realized loyalty is a common trait in waifus, and Kimika's loyalty toward Takuji is unbelievable to the point she becomes a chair for him. She does most things Takuji orders her to, and later even reveals she takes her own actions to further Takuji's goals when he wasn't able to. Even though they have similar motives, she didn't need to be this loyal toward him, so it feels a bit like unconditional love toward Takuji. Second, way too many boxes ticked. She is too relatable for any nerd. She's an anime fan, has bizarre hobbies like knives and chemistry. She's perverted and wants to lose her virginity before she dies, won't for the sake of Zakuro, and she outright admits she's autistic. What a manic pixie dream girl. Third, the way she acts is overly energetic and happy for someone who was bullied, and also talks about dark topics, but enthusiastically talking about drugs and stuff like that. I'll mention two scenes that show how great Kimika is. First, when she gives a status report on the cult, every single shot of her is adorably enthusiastic when talking about everyone around them being drugged out, having sex, and Nishimura is just dying in the corner. A lot of repetition is used to make the time pass faster and for comedic effect. It works so well to Kimika's quirkiness, who happily repeats Takuji as a savior. This scene was like overwhelmingly cute. I can barely handle how adorable she was in this scene. And lastly, the rooftop scene, of course, was enchanting. It seemed like Sakaji's interpretation on Emily Dickinson's poems about our brains being wider than the sky and having the same weight as God. It basically means there are no limits to what our minds can think of. God is just an invention of the mind, so they would have the same importance or weight. Kimika says at the end no teachers or politicians could have taught her that, but she learned it from being with Takuji. The world is cruel and impure, but beautiful at the same time, and this rooftop scene was truly beautiful. I'm just so moved by Kimika's character, I decided to make the world's first VNMV, visual novel music video, shipping Kimika and Takuji. It's going to be cringy as hell, but I don't care. I just happened to be listening to this song recently and realized, oh my god, the song fits so well, I just had to do it. So enjoy the next minute and a half of my Kimi Kuji ship presentation slides accompanied with Lady Gaga. Hope it doesn't get copyrighted. Anywho, Kimika best girl, better than Yuki, mic drop, goodbye. 2.45. What makes Asumi's H scene tragic? Besides the rooftop scene, I'd say another highlight for me specifically was Asumi's H scene. So Takuji orders Asumi to have sex with her father to prove her devotion. I think it's particularly tragic because this scene does show how cult followers wreck their own lives and their families' lives by being engaged in cult activities. Their cult leaders' demands always take priority, so they might do something dangerous and they become incredibly difficult to interact with or convinced their beliefs are harmful. Seeing Asumi's innocent father react to their beloved daughter, her devotion to this new cult, he thinks it's a joke at first, but he trusts her, but it's just saddening to see his reaction when he realizes it's serious. Even when he knows she's serious, he's still caring toward her and giving the benefit of the doubt, like she's under stress after one of her students died, but of course, she ties her father up and takes his pants off just to follow Takuji's orders. After that, she finally feels free and unburdened of her past life, exaggerated through riding a bike through the streets while peeing. It's tragic. This happens in real life. Well, maybe not exactly, but the emotions involved are pretty accurate when any cult follower is living with their family. It affects everyone in the family, having an immense effect on their mental health and well-being, and ruins any former intimacy they had with the victim. It's just horrible to see someone you love transform into something else, a stubborn believer of a cult you don't believe in and has the capacity to do dangerous things. I read about how they might be able to change back, and it usually takes years for victims to be released from their cult, and also they have to realize themselves they disagree with the cult or have problems with the cult before converting back to normal. So yeah, I just wanted to bring attention to the scene because it's absolutely tragic the effect cult followers have on their families. And I thought the Hage scene was nice, but no, yep, that's it. 2.46. Why fear death? So death, and specifically the fear of death, is a big theme in Subahibi, and the reason why is basically it goes completely against on how to have a happy life. Takuji's big speech is about how society hides death. Everyone tries to forget death. Aina taunts to Takuji about his fears, first about his fear of Asaki, but also his fear of death. Even though he's the savior and claims he's not afraid of anything, all his actions are motivated by a fear of death. He has a close connection with death. People are dying around him, like Zakuro. He gets haunted by ghosts, and it wants anyone who wronged her to die. So his mind is invaded by thoughts of death. As a person who has said, I want to die, like an unhealthy amount of times in certain phases of my life, I relate. Those thoughts were usually triggered by reminding myself of how difficult life is, or whenever I made any mistakes, which makes me feel guilt. Besides thoughts about not wanting to be alive anymore, those thoughts were just on an individual level. It could turn into an accelerationist movement. Like, this is why world-ending predictions are popular. People who want to believe in the world to end will want it to end because they think there is so much evil and injustice in the world, maybe because they have personally suffered so much in their life. So the first step is to not think the world is worth ending. Sure, there's a lot of bad in the world, but there's a lot of good as well. It just depends on what you experience and your outlook on it. I think specifically the fixation on death, though, is quite unhealthy. Any person who's happy with their life would not be thinking about death. Focus on what good life can offer instead of deciding life is bad and death is the answer. It's why Takuji is wrong in his speech. He's too fixated on death. It's our mutual interest to be happy, which is why society wants everyone to live and work together happily so no one pays attention to death. Memento mori and everything, but let death motivate you into seizing the moment and living happily. So that's my pep talk. 2.47. Why so much religious imagery? I think the references to Christianity in Subahibi aren't exactly subtle. You can find a lot of crosses in the background, and Takuji being the savior and leading his religion is obvious as well. But let's answer the question why exactly Subahibi decides to reference Christianity as much as it did. To heavily simplify Jesus Christ's journey, he did miracles to prove God's existence, which amassed a lot of followers, then suffered on a cross and died. I believe many Christians today, especially evangelists, relate on a personal level to Jesus' suffering. To me, religion appears in a person's life when they are suffering, when they are desperate and see no way to escape, so their answer is not something rational or physical, but in the spiritual, the religious. They hear of how Jesus suffered, relate, and hope they can reborn as well into a new life. I think it's why the afterlife is a staple of religion as well. It will motivate the living to lead better lives, to go to heaven when they die and to avoid hell. It would also alleviate the fear of death. No one knows what happens after death, but we can be comforted when we believe there is still life after death, an afterlife. I do believe Christianity is beautiful in this way, that so many people relate to one person's suffering and it can give them hope in their lives to do better. Obviously, that's not Christianity's only purpose, and not every Christian thinks the same way, but I still find it beautiful. Coming back to Subahibi, this mirrors Takuji's journey quite well. He suffered in his life because of bullying and just being purposeless in life until he decides to enact vengeance for Zakuro, cause some miracles and predictions, then motivates everyone to return to the sky, aka die. Christianity sort of also set the foundations on how to make your own cult. Just find some desperate people, do some miracles to convince them, and now you can order them around however you want. Just tell them it's for the sake of giving them peace or happiness or whatever. Besides Takuji, there is a lot of discussion about God, because Subahibi is about philosophy and God has always been a big topic in the history of philosophy. The point point is, that's why there's a lot of references to Christianity in Subahibi. 2.48. What makes It's My Own Invention so great? It's honestly so hard to pick which chapter in Subahibi is the best. They're all so good in their own way, but even in a poll done in VNDB, out of 83 votes, 60% chose It's My Own Invention to be the best route, and I do agree. I think Subahibi is known for its insanity and craziness just because of what happens in It's My Own Invention. DTRH2 kind of leads up to it as well, but I think what makes It's My Own Invention so unique is it just doesn't limit itself on how insane it gets, and also the protagonist who is the cause of it. He is surprisingly charismatic. He genuinely believes he's the savior and is just so cocky and laughably proud of himself. It's great you are able to read his thoughts throughout the entire route. There's this immediate disconnect between the reader and the protagonist, a realization he is so insane you cannot trust whatever he says. You're like stuck with him with his nonsensical thoughts for a long time as well, like the entire route is 15 hours maybe. So because of Takuji, we also get to see his delusions, which are equally extreme. There's not one moment, but so many memorable moments, like him having sex with Zakuro's desk, him talking to the scribble of Riruru on the wall with text glitching out, the battle in the sky filled with magical girls and blood, and there's so many other scenes. It's My Own Invention just goes so far and so dark, it's insane, it's all hard to describe. So I'd say It's My Own Invention is great because of its abundance of memorable moments and charismatic protagonist. The chapter ahead of us is also great, turning away from insanity and heading toward just straight up sadness. 2.5. Looking Glass Insects. Looking Glass Insects is the most depressing thing I've ever read. The true route paints a truly horrifying but realistic image of the hopeless life of a bully victim with seemingly no way out. Well, except if you have an actual angel on Earth, Kimika, but most people aren't as lucky to have her. We'll discuss both routes in the following section. 2.50. Looking Glass Insects Plot Recap. 2.501. True Route. Before the actual story, we see an excerpt from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, then a prologue between Takuji sort of passing the torch as the protagonist over to Zakuro. They see a happy couple. Takuji is disgusted and wants both to suffer, but Zakuro wants them both to be happy, a contrast between pessimistic and optimistic perspectives. Zakuro is in class and gets approached by Megu and Sadako to talk in the bathroom with Kimika, but she doesn't contribute much to the conversation. They talk about how gross otaku are when Zakuro relates to them. They also ask for concert tickets and notebooks from her when she needed them as well. Right after this, he meets Takuji, goes to the hideout, then she's disgusted by him and then leaves. That night, she hangs around on the school message boards, but left after getting cyberbullied, then a bullying prevention forum, but she gets stalked there. She can't seem to catch a break. The next day, she is forced to skip class because she gave her notebook yesterday and didn't expect to meet Takuji again. Instead of the meek, gross Takuji she met yesterday, this one was nice and approachable. He was even reading a classy book, Cyrano de Bergerac. Takuji recommends a book to Zakuro to read, but she can't stay focused and would rather talk to Takuji instead. She goes back to class and gets roped into a conversation with the bullies about making money. That afternoon, she goes back to Takuji's base to return the book, but sees his other side again after reading the message, "Why aren't you a virgin?" and then leaves. That night, she gets a mysterious message for her to recall a battle at the Stone Tower, but she has no idea what that means. The next day, she meets Takuji on the roof again, the nice one, and talk more about books. He gives her Cyrano de Bergerac, and she can't help but make the connection between the characters in the book and Takuji. In Cyrano, the main character is ugly, so he decides to use another man to speak his words to gain the affection of Roxanne. Takuji is like Cyrano. He has a hidden ugly side to him. She secretly took a picture of him on the rooftop and clutches it while rolling around in bed. Oh, that's actually pretty cute. That weekend, she's on the train but happens to meet Takuji and talk more about books. But once they stop at the amusement park, Zakuro can't help but grab his hand and get off the train. They go on a cute date, buys him shaved ice, and have a boat ride. They head back but decide to get something to eat first, so they head into the bar. They meet a flamboyant bartender called the Master, which Takuji seems familiar with, and starts playing the piano for her. The very next scene, Zakuro cooks an extravagant lunch for Takuji, but Zakuro starts realizing weird things about him. Takuji doesn't remember his underground hideout, and she hears rumors he's really strong and beats people up. Kimika notices Zakuro has been happy lately and spending time with Takuji, but warns her not to get too close. He's dangerous. This prompts a choice: care for Kimika or not think about it. We just go back to class without thinking about it. Megu talks again about making money, so she brings a camera to a restaurant and forces Kimika to lift her skirt up in public and record her. Zakuro meekly doesn't do anything to stop them. Kimika confronts them afterwards, but they were just trying to make some money. Once they ask Zakuro to be their model, Kimika gets defensive and pulls out a baton. The bullies call their male friends, who eventually subdue Kimika, and we don't know what happened to her after that. After this, Megu and Satoko drug Zakuro, then force her to do some embarrassing things in public to record her and sell the footage, such as getting naked in public and being sexually assaulted by a karaoke employee. I'm skimming over this, but these scenes were incredibly painful to read. Zakuro did this for Kimika's safety, but we still don't know what happened to her. The next day, she can't find her underwear in her locker for some reason, so she had to go to class without them. Suddenly, Megu started cutting up her skirt. Once class was over, she tried running away, but Megu and Satoko have blackmail of her from yesterday, so they force her to start doing ballet twirls in class. Everyone could see Zakuro was not wearing anything underneath. The humiliation wasn't over, as later she sees her underwear pinned to the blackboard with writing next to it saying, "Buy my panties, they're still warm." That afternoon, they forcibly ripped off Zakuro's skirt under the pretense they would fix it for her, but she's had enough and shouts she wants them to die over and over again. Stuck in class without the skirt until night, she fashions a skirt out of rags and duct tape, but meets Megu and Satoko, who again offers her skirt back. But after that, they suggest for her to take some pills, but Zakuro is not stupid. She didn't have a choice, as she was forcibly drugged and taken away by the male bullies and then gets raped. She couldn't help but feel filthy inside her own body after being violated. Walking out, she starts crying and screaming. She doesn't have the courage to tell the police or even her parents about this. She wanted her first time to be with someone she loved, like Takuji, but she just had to be raped. Uttering the words, she's a worm whose fate is to be trampled and stepped upon. She's just a dumb, ugly girl. Why did she think she deserved more? She won't cause any more trouble. She wants to stay human. She doesn't want to die. Oh man, I'm really not doing Zakuro's hatred and despair justice here. The next day, Megu and Satoko realize they've gone too far as they've broken Zakuro. But she'll be fine. She's just a bit sad right now. Then Zakuro gets hallucinations of God, who keeps mocking and making fun of her while she repeats over and over again she doesn't want to die. She pretends to be a pure innocent girl, but she's really a whore who would sell her body. She even meets Takuji on the roof again, but even he's disgusted by her filth. She meets Ayana on the roof, who says that God has no power over her, assuring she hasn't gone insane. But Zakuro is still hostile toward Ayana. Why is any of this happening to her? But at that moment, she receives a text from the same people who sent the battle at the Stone Tower message, aware of Zakuro's suffering. And right after that, Shiroyama just happens to fall off the building and dies. Zakuro is beyond ecstatic. One of the men who deflowered her yesterday died. Thinking the message was related to his death, she decides to meet with the sender, who happen to be two girls, suffering like she is. They talk about their shared suffering, give a rundown on their weird terminology like specialized psychic bug and brain reverse, and reveal the fact they were magical girls in the past having a battle at the Stone Tower against Har Megiddo. Anywho, they convince her they need to do a ritual called the Spiral Matai, where they reincarnate to the next world or something. Zakuro generally believes in all this. The next day, she feels rejuvenated, happy, something she hasn't felt in a long time. She meets Ayana one last time, who doesn't interfere with Zakuro's fate. She meets Takuji at the shopping center, nice as always, but he doesn't seem to remember her, and spouts off about tribadism or something. Zakuro decides to kiss him right then and there and warn him about the sky full of anxious words, then leaves with the girls to do their spiral matai. Once the time approaches, the girls suddenly start getting cold feet. They regret doing this. Zakuro has went completely insane, spouting about having panache. She grabs the girls' hands and jump off the building. Well, that was incredibly depressing. One of the most harrowing depictions of bullying, rape, and suicide I've ever read. After the fun and insane It's My Own Invention, a realistic and grounded perspective on being bullied was needed, and Looking Glass Insects delivered to the extreme. I just felt so much hatred and despair throughout. Luckily, I saved Kimika's route right after this, which is much less depressing and more feel-good. 2.502 Kimika route. So Zakuro meets with Takuji a bunch of times, maybe fall in love with him, and Kimika is warning against meeting up with him. But what's the deal with Kimika? That afternoon, Kimika was naked and wet in the classroom, even though she denies she was bullied. Zakuro can tell she was bullied and helps her. Kimika warns her to stay away. She's not used to kindness. Zakuro is planting seeds of gout within Kimika. She used to be bullied alone, but now she has to think about Zakuro too. Kimika tries pushing Zakuro away by insulting and warning her, but she keeps staying with her. Kimika finally explains why they get bullied. Megu has a boyfriend who called Zakuro cute, so she is jealous of her. Kimika was bullied for the same reason. Anyways, Kimika says, don't try to help her. The next day though, in the restaurant, when Megu and Satoko are trying to record Kimika's underwear in public, Zakuro suddenly gets some courage and runs away with Kimika. That was a stupid move. They'll bully them even harder next time, but Zakuro doesn't regret it. She must have gained that courage from talking to Takuji. In the morning, the bullies come back and threaten to beat up Kimika, but she pulls out a stun gun. Mega reveals the fact Kimika brought the stun gun to school, but Kimika breaks it and says it's just a broken cell phone. Why would she need a stun gun to school anyways? If they answer that question, then they reveal their bullying, so they stay quiet. She shows off the rest of her arsenal, which is a bunch of dangerous chemicals and cultures of bacteria that will easily poison them to the point they'll get hospitalized. And also, she has blackmail on them. Point is, Kimika is quite weak, so she has to outsmart the bullies instead. Suddenly, the male bullies appear and they escape using a flashlight and a sticky, bad-smelling substance thrown at them. Anywho, they will meet Takuji again, but he doesn't remember Sakura at all. His personality is different from the shy one or the nice book-loving one. This one is more serious. Kimika has a cute moment with him that confiscates her tanto knife while making fun of her small chest while being jealous of Zakuro's. Okay, we're getting back into the fan service. But they're having a fun, lighthearted dialogue, which is a big difference from the despair of the bullying the true route. The bullies fight back against Kimika using her own medicine, warfare through trickery. They dump raw eggs on them, which forces them to change their clothes. But they stole their spare clothes, so they have to wait until night for their current clothes to dry after being washed. That was part of their plan, to wait for them until night though. They approach the girls, but Kimika whips them and runs away to the park. The bullies, though, have the upper hand from numbers alone. They try to lash out but are pushed down and was about to have their way with them, but Takuji, the savior that he is, comes in just in time. He easily takes down the entire crowd of bullies and scares the rest away. He gives back the knife to Kimika and she's angry they had to rely on him, but admits he saved him. The next day, none of the bullies even came to school, but Kimika is still angry Takuji saved them, and also the fact Sakura wants to meet him. She does, and they talk about Tsuruno again. Just like Tsuruno, who doesn't want Roxanne to know his true identity, Takuji doesn't want Sakura to know about his. Despite this, he still befriends Sakura even in peaceful days. One day, Sakura urges Kimika to skip class. Bold of her, but even bolder is she kisses Kimika out of nowhere. She used to be shy, but now has the courage to do what she wants. Kimika is obviously flustered, but she did secretly want this as well. She was jealous Sakura was with Takuji, and she already took her virginity one special afternoon. But more on that later. Sakura meets with Aina, who basically explains the harmonizer personality of Takuji stayed. She doesn't understand what she means by that, but it doesn't matter anymore. She's happy without knowing the answer. She thanks Kimika for walking by her side. Sakura learned to be grateful for every moment and is taking the first step to her wonderful every day. But no, it didn't end yet. There's a hate scene between Sakura and Kimika. Skaji, you Yuri-loving rascal. Okay, now that's the end of Kimika's route. Man, that was just really nice. Kimika's route in Looking Glass Insects works as such a great standalone story of fighting against adversity and suffering through love and ingenuity. I didn't put too much attention on subtle details on the romance between Takuji and Sakura, as well as Kimika, but this route feels more like a shoujo romance compared to the shonen action in It's My Own Invention, and Jabberwocky too, I guess. I do have a bit of a theory that It's My Own Invention and Looking Glass Insect explore the mind of a depressed, suffering individual from a male and female perspective, so some of the following questions will be more about gender philosophy, which is an interesting topic to me. 2.51. How do I relate to Sakura? Even though I relate to Takuji more, I'd still say I'm like 40% Sakura. Admittedly, when I first read Subahibi, I thought the beginning of Looking Glass Insects was just boring, but after a reread, I realized I relate to her in many ways as well. Her introduction where she's just laying on her bed looking at her phone, doom scrolling on forums or social media, like, that's just everyone. Everyone does that. I bet you're doing that right now on your phone in bed. But this aesthetic appeals to me since I spend 90% of my free time on my laptop in bed. Like, I just want to be comfortable and surrounded by huge pillows and plushies. In the beginning, we don't know too much about Sakura herself. She's a passive character who gets coiled up in bad situations, like getting bullied. She's just a nice girl, but her environment has jaded her. Later, it gets much worse, but even in the beginning, it feels depressing. Bored in class and talking to people, her bullies that she doesn't like. It's ennui, an eternal boredom until something interesting happens, like Takuji, for instance, her new romance. Sounds contradictory, but boredom is a surprisingly comfy feeling. She's also timid and shy, can't say no. If you've watched my Hanukkah video, you know exactly what I've been through. The message at the end where she gains courage, starts taking action, and not being afraid of saying what's on her mind really resonated with me, especially in my recent life. I think Takuji's fun, but Sakura has a character development that I would closer resemble. 2.52. Why am I a feminist? So I had a section here talking about how horrible Zakuro's suffering is, and talking about how it was related to the broader topic of injustices done toward women, whether subtle or extreme. But I had second thoughts because the original draft was too opinionated and filled with too much rhetoric, so I removed this section. I just don't want to spread the idea around I'm a feminist or anything. That said, it is still a topic I believe to be very important, considering what happens in Looking Glass insects, and I would have explained how I become a supporter for women's rights because of deep personal reasons. 2.53. Why are bullies cruel? I think we can both agree Megu and Satoko are the worst characters in Subahibi and the worst people on planet Earth. They suck. The reason we get for why they bully is literally just they're jealous of their boyfriend calling Zakuro cute once, and that's why they bully them so heavily. But bullying in real life usually doesn't happen because of petty reasons. I wish I had a proper source for this, but I'm just gonna use this blog, psychologyorg.com. I'm too lazy to read a journal for this. Bullying usually happens because there is something wrong with the bullies themselves. As children, they don't have full control over their emotions and don't have enough empathy to not let it out on other people. So the reasons for bullying could be being insecure and wanting to make others feel insecure, having a desire for power, or just being used to violence or aggression in their family's lives so they think it's normal. Now, does this justify their behavior? No, never, but I think we should at least understand why bullying happens. I would still blame their lack of empathy for when the bullying gets intense or out of control. They wanted to alleviate their own emotions but don't account for how their victims feel at all, so their actions escalate. One last thing I want to focus on related to bullying would be female bullying. In male bullying, it's simply physical violence, but for female bullies, it's a little more complicated. The causes are different as well. It's more about appearances and social rank. They are more anxious about social pressures and norms, and just like Megu and Satoko, jealousy and competition is another big cause for bullying. The way female bullying manifests is usually indirect, using gossiping or rumors to assert control. It's a lot more verbal instead of physical. We see in Looking Glass insects, Megu and Satoko never physically abuse Zakuro, but what they do is, under the guise that they are friends, ask for concert tickets or notebooks when Zakuro clearly needs them, or force Zakuro into embarrassing situations like pinning her underwear on the blackboard, doing ballet with a cut in her skirt, or stripping naked outside. The way they bully her is destroying her mentally, which is just as bad, if not worse, than physical bullying. The blog I mentioned earlier also gave tips on how to stop bullying, but that is outside the scope of this question, so I guess you'll never know. But okay, I left the link in the description. 2.54. Why is God consistently drawn in unflattering ways? In two separate occasions, Subahibi shows God, and in both occasions, God is drawn in this ugly, hideous way. Takuji goes to the roof to meet God and passes out. Then Zakuro gets taunted by God about how filthy she is after being raped by the bullies. So in the view of these characters, God is a disgusting creature. I think it's because there is this huge difference between what society or religion wants you to think who God is, which is this omnibenevolent being who promises happiness and joy toward all human beings. But if that's the case, why is there so much evil and injustice in the world? In philosophy, this is known as the problem of evil. It's an interesting topic, but I won't get into it much here, so I'll link the Wikipedia page for it. I'm just a big sucker for Wikipedia. Always trust it, never question it. In the case of Takuji, he thinks God is useless because he will become the true savior of humanity while God is doing nothing. For Zakuro, she gets sexually assaulted, which was none of her fault, and then her thoughts haunt her for getting sexually assaulted in the shape of God, who can be blamed for forcing her to get assaulted. I explained in 2.47 about why there was religious imagery, that people come to religion when they are desperate. I believe that when people are suffering, God naturally appears in their lives. They start thinking about God because there's no rational reason for why they are suffering, so they need a spiritual answer. I suppose it could either go two ways. They become evangelists and try to improve their lives using God who preaches these positive messages, or fight back and lash out at God, this hypocrite who is omnibenevolent but makes him suffer so much at the same time. I guess that's why Takuji and Zakuro think God is this disgusting being. 2.55. What was that cult jargon about? So Zakuro gets invited by Usami and Ayumi's magical girl cult. Usami explains a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was a peaceful planet called El Himuro, but there was corruption in people's hearts which will manifest into a great disaster. To fight against this disaster, a team was created called the Crimson Hyperspace, which consists of 3 angels. They fought at the battle at the Stone Tower, and when the Lord of Darkness, Har Megiddo, failed to destroy the world, he sealed the angels' souls souls when reincarnating into this world, turning them into powerless human girls. They plan to do a brain reverse so they can gain their powers again, but stopping them is the specialized psychic bug caused by Harmigado as well, which makes them lose hope, causing negative thoughts about ending the world and such. The specialized psychic bug is also implanted in everyone's heads, eating their memories and emotions, which makes them evil and uncaring. Lastly, they need to do the Spiral Matai ritual. They reincarnated into this world, so they need to reincarnate again into another world and gain the powers they once had as angels again. So basically they believe they were born in the wrong world, they are meant to be magical girls in another world, they believe everyone around them are evil because of psychic bugs, and need to move on to the next world by dying. They're trying to understand in their own twisted system why the world is evil and why they should die. They're coping, basically. I don't really want to do research on any cult to see if they have a similar system, but I'm just gonna assume they are. You know what? Just watch ContraPoint's video on conspiracies. I think that is very relevant to this topic. I do like this system specifically because it's about magical girls and it's appealing to women, so that's cool. 2.56. Why is The Final Smile or Shumatsubi Sho such an emotional song? This song plays during the end credits of Looking Glass Insects, The True Route, and it's just so emotional. My favorite ending song, and that's saying something because they're so hard to choose, especially the ones composed by Sazak, who is a member of Supercell, by the way. Lyrically and instrumentally, it's perfect to my ears. Kaji wrote the lyrics, and he has no chill whatsoever. I would say the meaning of this song, the emotion conveyed, is the happiness right before purposely dying, right before jumping off a building and hitting the ground. Lyrics like the pomegranate fruit's memories spill on the ground. Pomegranate in Japanese is zakuro, by the way, and as I fall down, I'm enveloped in happiness. I know despair no longer. Like, holy shit, calm down, dude. The song hits different on a bad day, like it's actually dangerous. I want to analyze it instrumentally as well. I've listened to quite a bit of music, check my Rate Your Music, but I'm no Nafithani Napkin Thano either, so don't judge me, but this song makes me feel. This song just makes me feel, and I just wanted to talk about it. It feels like it was played in a dark, damp basement, and the sound is echoing off the walls, and it surrounds you in this depressing atmosphere. There's the searing guitar and aggressive drums that are just seeped in despair and anger, and it's such a fitting juxtaposition, on top of the angelic female vocals provided by Hana. The song probably got me into noise rock and emo music. I haven't heard anything that scratches the same itch as this exact song. There are definitely similarly depressing albums and bands. The closest I can think of is Have a Nice Life. I've been trying to find some other like hardcore Japanese bands out there, but they're not as depressing as this song. So if you have any suggestions on songs similar to The Final Smile, I'm all ears. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. 2.57. What was the point of Kimika's route? Unlike It's My Own Invention, the ending for Kimika's route is vastly different from its true route. I'd say the purpose of Kimika's route and It's My Own Invention is just to spend more time with Kimika and understand her character more, but in Looking Glass Insects, it's that and much more. Looking Glass Insects splits off after Zakuro makes a choice to basically be more proactive and be curious about Kimika's situation instead of just going back to the classroom and staying passive. By befriending Kimika, their bond becomes stronger. They motivate each other to fight back against the bullies and continue living. The true route, she didn't take action and just kept following the bullies' orders, which made her suffer. I do think this is an actual lesson bully victims and people who are dissatisfied with their lives should learn. Take action. Your situation is not as hopeless as you think it is. Think of a way to escape your bad situation and have the courage to actually change and do something about it. Have some panache. I think finding a friend, having a close relationship with someone like Kimika for Zakuro helps a lot as well. Many people's worth come from what other people think of them, and humans are social creatures after all. And by the way, Zakuro was lucky to find a person as great as Kimika. So it's important to mention you should actively try to find friends as well. Lonely people, like me, see everyone else already be in their own friend groups. They somehow click together and won't accept outsiders, but that's not true. Just insert yourself into a conversation and say what's on your mind. Besides that, there's bound to be some kind of gathering for whatever niche interests you have locally. Anime or fighting game clubs or whatever. Even if there isn't anything local, there's forums and Discord groups. You just have to find them. Take that first step. I bet you'll find someone fun to hang out with, and maybe you'll even make a lifelong friend. Who knows? I'm mostly speaking to my past self, honestly. I didn't do this, but I really should have. Anywho, you should actively find your happiness. 2.58. What is Zakuro and Kimika's relationship? I wanted to write again about character dynamics, this time Zakuro and Kimika, and why I find their relationship beautiful, relatable even. There are a lot of characteristics between Zakuro and Kimika that are complete opposites of each other. Zakuro is shy and passive, Kimika is more expressive and active. Zakuro is kind and good-natured, Kimika, well, she isn't evil, but she is generally cunning. She's willing to do harm and lie. Most importantly, I want to talk about strong and weak gender dynamics. I don't know what else to call it. A strong man is physically strong and muscular. A weak man is physically weak and scrawny. A strong woman, like Kimika, is intelligent, manipulative even, which would imply a weak woman, like Zakuro, is airheaded and slow. I wouldn't call Zakuro dumb, but she falls into that trope and is slow in comparison to Kimika. But don't worry, she makes up for it in her kindness. The problem with intelligence is this knowledge that everyone else is smart as well. Once you know everyone is smart, you can try to predict how they can act, and you can react accordingly to achieve your goals. Why it's a problem, though, is because it assumes everyone is acting for themselves. Everyone is selfish and only act to achieve their own goals. An egoist world. But there are people who don't act selfishly. They act out of unconditional love for other people. But it's confusing for intelligent people because they just cannot trust them and think they have ulterior motives. This is what Kimika was basically explaining at the end of her route, and it's my own invention. She couldn't accept Zakuro forgiving her for all the wrong she did toward her, the bullying and not being able to protect her in the end. She couldn't accept her kindness. This is something I unconsciously related to. I wasn't even aware of it, but I wrote a story about this exact relationship that was accidentally inspired by Subahibi. Okay, lastly, I just want to mention this. At the end of Kimika's route, Zakuro gained some courage and started doing and saying what's on her mind. She kisses Kimika in public, which even makes Kimika flustered. Zakuro, who was always shy, now takes the lead. A reversal of roles. It just shows how much the bullying limited her true character too, who is this playful, teasing girl, just like Kimika. So yeah, Looking Glass Insects is really good. 2.6. Jabberwocky. Jabberwocky is the chapter when Subahibi starts peeling away the mystery and when most of the painful parts are over. A lot of people enjoy the laid-back, positive attitude Jabberwocky gives. I can understand, but I admired Subahibi for going as hard as it did in earlier chapters. That said, Jabberwocky is still a great chapter, finally giving many of the much-needed answers, while also being a fun, relaxing, metaphorical walk in the park after the horrors we went through. It's almost therapeutic. Okay, let's get into the recap. 2.60. Jabberwocky Plot Recap. The Jabberwocky, the nonsense poem by Lewis Carroll, about a nameless man slaying a monster, reminds Tomasani of himself. In a gay bar, he is reminded of his confidants, his little sister who he doesn't want to be close to, Hasaki, and Master who owns the bar. He likes teasing Tomasani about what's between his legs. Hasaki freaks out and they have a fun conversation. The next day on the roof, a perverted but philosophical girl, Yuki, talks to him. Even though she is not physically there, Tomasani can still feel her next to him, makes him slightly uncomfortable with how, touchy she is. Jabberwocky hints at the answer to the fact that 3 personalities in one body without outright explaining it, but it should be obvious at this point. They explore how the DID works throughout Jabberwocky. A lot of details are dropped, which I'll explain later. Here they talk about how Yuki is Takuji's desired personality, her fading memories, and Tomasani's fate to destroy Takuji. They hear someone coming and Tomasani lets Yuki deal with it. Turns out it's Zakuro. Cue conversation from Looking Glass Insects. Tomasani wakes up at a weird place. He doesn't really have any control when he's unconscious. Hasaki comes in and wants to talk to Tomasani, but he pushes her away. It's a shame for Hasaki since he's the only one she can talk to besides Yuki, who might disappear soon. Yuki decides to physically hug Hasaki for the sake of Tomasani and Hasaki to get along together. But Tomasani, whose role is to destroy Takuji, will disappear soon, so there's no point in getting closer to Hasaki. Flashback, Tomasani was born out of Takuji when he was at his lowest point. That one H scene with the bullies where he stole and wore Zakuro's clothes. He beat those bullies up and beat up the pitiful Takuji, then gave Zakuro her clothes back. He exists out of Takuji's desire to destroy himself, so that's what he will do. But soon he meets another person inhabiting Takuji's headspace, Yuki, who introduces herself as his big sister and keeps attacking him for some reason. She taught him how to fight after that and how to deal with the whole DID situation. Leaving the flashback, they talk about Takuji and his relationship with her little sister Hasaki. The doll she always brings around was a personal gift by Takuji, knitted by him after a lot of trial and error, which is why Hasaki brings it around everywhere. They also hint of an incident possibly caused by Takuji's mother, Kotomi. We don't know what happened, but we do know Takuji was hospitalized and mentally scarred. Hasaki was does too. Later, Tomasani meets up with the bullies, steals their drugs, and flushes them down the toilet. A reporter named Kimura notices this and questions Tomasani about it, but Tomasani is naturally suspicious and mean towards him. That night, he's finally free and alone. Yuki is gone and Hisaki is working at the bar, so he plays some video games, but turns out Hisaki came early. Tomasani tries to push her away by pretending he's playing a porn game, but she stays anyways while being incredibly embarrassed. He tries to make himself look as hateable as possible, but no matter what, she just doesn't leave, even willing to watch a sex scene with him. Next scene, Yuki is playing piano for Zakuro. Yuki and Tomasani get into a perverted argument about sweating semen. Tomasani keeps getting flustered. Of course, they had the discussion while Zakuro is right there. Walking home, they're worried about Yuki, who's trying to fight their destiny. She's hanging onto consciousness and forgetting all her memories. They have an interesting discussion about how identity is formed by the continuation of memory. Anywho, I don't know what spurred this to happen, but they all decide to sleep together. In class, Hisaki comes to give Tomasani lunch, while Miyu finds the situation cute. He meets Kimura again, who's been snooping around about their past with the White Lotus Association, then destroys his camera. He goes home to take a bath and Yuki appears. They notice Takaji's presence is getting stronger while Yuki's is getting weaker. Of course, Hisaki doesn't want Yuki to steal him, so she comes in with a swimsuit. They talk about Tomasani's tastes in girls and if he likes Hisaki, so she asks, what does Tomasani see her as? They have the choice to say, yeah or no, basically. We say yeah first, which would obviously anger Hisaki. She comes back without her swimsuit to challenge Yuki, choosing, of course, Netsu's The Wonderful Everyday ending, by the way. He wakes up after 4 days of being unconscious. The gaps of unconsciousness are getting longer and longer. He hurries to Takaji, syncs up their channels, and bullies him again, reminding him of his debt of 50,000 yen. After that scene, he wakes up again, confused where he is. It's been 2 days since the last time he was conscious. He walks back to his house from Takaji's base and finds Yuki, but when he tried to reach her, his hand went through her. She kept spouting about buying CDs and couldn't hear Tomasani, so this is not the Yuki he knows. This is the Yuki meant to replace her. Tomasani actually feels lonely now that she's gone, but then he feels something. A hug. The new Yuki is Takaji's desired person to become, which requires erasing the old Yuki, but she is trying her best to cling onto existence. Losing Yuki forces Tomasani to accept she will miss her when she's gone, tears welling up in his eyes. A week later, he is awoken by Hisaki, 7 days unconscious. Hisaki really misses him, not even letting him shower by himself. She follows him all the way to school as well. Tomasani wouldn't have issues leaving her if she didn't care for him so much. His vision starts getting blurry and starts seeing what Takaji is seeing, the Katsuki sisters, thoughts about Zakuro's death, but he is clinging onto his consciousness. Oh, by the way, Zakuro died. He talks about this with Miyu. Takaji's thoughts start flooding in again, so this might be his last chance to erase him, but he loses consciousness right there. Once he wakes up, Takaji seems different, much more confident. They go to the roof to fight, Tomasani feigning his bravery against Takaji, who goes on about his illusions about becoming the savior, and Tomasani as an obstacle from his mother. They fight and Takaji won as Tomasani loses his consciousness. The next thing Tomasani sees is being carried by Yuki up a mountain. They arrive at a dojo and she trains him how to defeat Takaji, but not in a normal way, through lucid dreaming, since this is all a battle of the mind. They aren't in a real-life dojo either. This is a mind palace, and this dojo is from their childhood village. They talk a lot about this dream world, their past and motivations, and how to defeat Takaji using lucid dreams. So to train him, Yuki moves imperceptibly fast, then Tomasani realizes he's too slow. This is a dream, so he just has to alter reality to move as fast as her. After that lesson, he also realizes he needs more will than Takaji to win, which is difficult considering Takaji thinks he's a literal god. He wakes up on the rooftop of Building C to meet Aina. She was just finished turning Takaji unconscious via Futanari H scene. Tomasani takes his opportunity to meet with Hisaki before his final confrontation with Takaji. In the bar, he asks to fight the master, to prove he has surpassed him. Physically, he is much stronger, but Tomasani has the willpower. After a long battle, he hits him hard. Hisaki comforts him, saying he didn't have to go through this. She just wants to spend time with him, for as long as they're alive. But Tomasani is doing this for her sake, so he would be the one to protect her. They realize their ever-growing feelings for each other, and then become one. In the older version, they had a H scene together. But after that, he goes to the rooftop to meet Aina. She asks him, is he afraid of death? The same question she asked Takaji. He is scared of disappearing, but we can never experience death. It is not something worth fearing. Anyways, Takaji wakes up and tries to prove Aina is a Futanari, then goes on a lecture about the creator, harmonizer, and destroyer, which confused Takaji, but Tomasani understands. Tomasani shows himself to Takaji, calls his delusions stupid, likening them to the Copernican principle. The people of the time were sure the Earth was the center of the universe, just like Takaji is now of his delusions. He had to train hard to beat Takaji while he was in his own world. They fight, and Tomasani wins this time. Hisaki and Kimura appear, but all of a sudden Takaji's willpower is stronger and grabs the knife from Tomasani and stabs him. He has outlived his purpose. Hisaki hugs his body, Tomasani about to disappear, regretting pushing Hisaki away and not making enough memories with her. In their last moments, he wishes to go back to their childhood village and see the sunflowers with her. 2.61. What is my opinion on Jabberwocky? So, that was Jabberwocky. What did I think about it? Well, at first I didn't really like it. It had such a different vibe compared to the rest of Subahibi. I thought the rest of Subahibi would be, as insane and depressing. The comedy was now on the level of a second-rate ecchi anime. A lot of perverted hijinks between Yuki and Asaki, while Tomasane is dense and tries to stay chaste. It also tries to make us care about these new characters, Tomasane and Asaki's relationship, and it's just a domestic sibling relationship compared to Savior and his loyal eccentric follower, or even a close mutual relationship born from and to fight against adversity, aka bullies. It's more interesting and there's a lot more stakes there. I remember describing the plot as a generic shonen training arc to fight against Takaji as the final boss. Again, comparing to the insanity of It's My Own Invention, this is peanuts. But nowadays, I think about Jabberwocky differently. It's not trying to be the other chapters. I think back then I related to Takaji and Zakuro much more, but nowadays I have more empathy and realize what Jabberwocky is trying to teach. The interactions between Tomasane and Takaji, which I'll get into later. I obviously still much prefer It's My Own Invention and Looking Glass Insects. They are much more memorable, but Jabberwocky serves its purpose. I was more open-minded this time around and even enjoyed some of the comedy scenes, especially when Hasaki stayed with Tomasane when he pretended to play an eroge. It's cute she decided to stay for the sake of spending more time with Tomasane. It is generally hard to get the audience to care about characters introduced in the last half of the story, so it's natural I wouldn't like them as much. That said, there were some highlights. After reading my own recap, having the plot shown into its essentials, I can feel the close relationship between Yuki, Hasaki, and Tomasane be ripped apart by forces beyond their control. Yuki is losing her memories, Tomasane will disappear soon and is focused on defeating Takaji, while Hasaki is an innocent victim in all this. It's a sad situation. So Jabberwocky is good for what it is, but it wasn't that ambitious in the first place compared to the earlier chapters. 2.62. What does DID explain? And what does it not explain? So in Jabberwocky, it should be clear by now that our main protagonist has dissociative identity disorder, or has multiple personalities in his body. This is the key to explaining many of the mysteries in the past chapters that I've explained before. It explains why Takaji's personalities were so different in Looking Glass Insects, it's the answer to many mysteries in DTRH2, and was the cause of some of the hallucinations in It's My Own Invention. The DID mostly explains why certain characters like Yuki, Takaji, or Tomasane appear with static noise, and also every mystery surrounding the Wakatsuki sisters. They don't exist, they are just how Yuki or Takaji see Hasaki. I've already delved into it on DTRH2 and It's My Own Invention, what the DID explains, but here I want to focus on what is confusing about Subahibi's implementation of DID. I did some cursory research on DID. By that, of course, I mean just skimming the Wikipedia page, so while DID is a popular mental disorder in media, in real life it's not clearly understood. Debated if it even is a real clinical disorder. It's often misdiagnosed actually, because many psychiatrists are not properly knowledgeable on DID. So naturally, if professionals don't know much about it, how is a normal person expected to? I can't really comment on how realistic the portrayal is, and to be fair to Subahibi, is not trying to be an accurate portrayal of DID either, but I can still comment on some inconsistencies, or at least some parts that don't make sense to me. A lot of it is minor, so I won't get too deep into it, but confused me anyways. It usually has to do with how other people see Yuki, Tomasane, and Takaji. It's weird Hasaki can differentiate between the characters in Jabberwocky, but since she spends a lot of time with them, I suppose she gets used to it. But for the bullies, I'm surprised they wouldn't find it weird. They can bully Takaji but get scared around Tomasane. They don't even comment on it. Lastly, how these characters see each other. Turns out the personalities, when someone has DID, can interact with each other. Their personalities can mingle. I'm not sure if that's medically accurate, but okay. As Takaji, we saw Yuki kiss Zakuro that one scene, which shouldn't be possible. I guess he was physically kissing Zakuro, but one of his personalities, Takaji, appeared on a rooftop nearby to see them do it. Alright, there were just some things that I found confusing, and DID has never been a commonly understood topic either, but whatever, it's not a big deal. 2.63. What is the theory behind Subahibi's version of DID? A bit more on the DID. I mentioned earlier it's not medically accurate and is clearly not trying to be either. It does, however, have its own system that tries to explain Takaji's specific version of DID. One of the real-life causes of DID is childhood trauma, so that's accurate. We'll see the incident in Jabberwocky too, but basically Tomasane became hospitalized, and either because he possessed him or it was DID. He started thinking he was Takaji. Later, the Yuki personality appeared, the personality he wanted to become, and then he was bullied severely one day, which made him hate himself and destroy himself, so Tomasane appeared, the personality which will destroy his current self. So that's why Takaji is called the creator, Yuki is the harmonizer, and Tomasane is the destroyer. And yeah, that's basically it. The two big conflicts in Jabberwocky is first, the disappearance of Yuki. The new Yuki is meant to replace the old one. The second is Tomasane's fate to destroy Takaji and disappear after that. The problem is he doesn't want to disappear after meeting Hasaki, and they gain a close connection, so he promises to stay after destroying Takaji. There's a bit more complicated theory. Aina mentions a few things right before the last battle between Tomasane and Takaji, but that's the main gist of it. 2.64. How does Tomasane Tomasane defeat Takuji. In a real fight, it's usually physical strength or technique, but in Subahibi it's different. Because it's a fight between two personalities in one person's mind, there's a lot more psychology involved. There's a long scene between Tomasane and Yuki in the Mind Palace dojo where she trains him to defeat Takuji. Yuki suggests using the power of lucid dreaming. It allows the user to be aware while dreaming and manipulate whatever they want in the dream. Being able to do that during a fight with Takuji is a huge advantage, but how do you do it? There's some complicated psychology involved, but we try to keep a part of the consciousness awake during a dream to control it. Another thing about dreams, what seems like an hour in a dream might only be a few minutes in reality. Using this can affect the amount of time one personally perceives, but a different amount to another, which would also be incredibly advantageous in a fight to move faster than your opponent. But it's more like perceiving time in a different way. Besides that, willpower is very important. In this make-believe mental world, whoever wants it more, whoever believes it harder wins. This is what makes Takuji such a dangerous opponent, since he genuinely believes he controls the world and is the savior. This is why he tests himself by trying to defeat the master, because the master is physically stronger. He can only defeat him by having more willpower. But we already know Tomasane does not defeat Takuji in the very end. I think one of the main themes of Jabberwocky is loss, so let's explore that. 2.65. Why should we embrace relationships when loss is inevitable? Throughout Subahibi, death is a prominent theme, and in Jabberwocky, two people start disappearing from existence, which is Yuki and Tomasane. They both have the opposite view when faced with an inevitable fate. Tomasane, knowing he will disappear rationally, decides to not have any close relationships, because if he does, he will have to experience saying goodbye to the ones he loves, such as Sasaki. What he exchanges for not experiencing loss is not being able to savor the current moment, having fun with the ones he wants to protect, pushing them away instead. Yuki, having the same fate, still gets closer with Sasaki and Tomasane anyways. She's able to enjoy every moment she had with them. That's worth having even if she felt sad saying goodbye to them. At the very end, Tomasane learns this lesson. If he avoided having an emotional connection with them, he still spent a lot of time with them anyways, enjoyed having them around and missed them in the end. So he might as well not have pushed them away and had fun. He didn't have a lot of time, but it's the same principle for us. We will have to say goodbye to the ones we love, even if they aren't going to die soon. We graduate school or move away and won't see each other for a while. The memories we have with them are precious. Even saying goodbye is an important memory, painful but necessary. It only reminds us how much of a close connection we had. I think as humans, we should never try to suppress our emotions. We like to feel things. We might prefer only positive emotions, but being able to feel sadness and anger is human as well, and we should just let ourselves feel. 2.66. What is the special relationship between Takuji and Tomasane? Takuji and Tomasane are diametrically opposed characters, faced with death, but they have very different attitudes. Tomasane, in a different way from Takuji, feared death, but specifically fearing losing his loved ones. He eventually learns right before he dies that he should have never feared it in the first place. He liked spending time with Sasaki and should have savored his time with her. But about fear, I think the main difference between Takuji and Tomasane is the motivations for their actions. Takuji is motivated by fear and Tomasane by courage. Tomasane's full name in Jabberwocky is literally Tomasane Yuki. Yuki meaning courage in Japanese, but I call him Tomasane to not get mixed up with Yuki. Takuji experiences tons of hallucinations, partly caused by fear. Zakuro's death haunts him, and he tries to spread her curse and cause even more fear throughout the school. He is scared of facing his past with Sasaki as well, denying her existence by replacing her with the Wakatsuki sisters. He wants himself and everyone to return to the sky to escape from the suffering of life. Tomasane is the opposite. He wants to stay alive to protect the ones he loves. He wants to preserve life instead of destroy it. Takuji spreads death. Tomasane protects life. The strength is also based on this. Takuji is motivated by his fake hallucinations caused by his anxiety, pain from his past with his mother and Zakuro's death. He has delusions of grandeur as well as to cope to pretend he's the savior. He gets his strength from pretending he has that much power, basically. Tomasane is motivated by having real human connections with Sasaki and Yuki that keep him going. In Jabberwocky, he had to experience a lot of pain as well, losing Sasaki and Yuki, but he pushes through it and trains even harder with lucid dreaming and sheer willpower to defeat Takuji. Tomasane worked hard, but Takuji didn't have to lift a finger. Takuji is fake, Tomasane is real. I hope that was coherent. I think their relationship could be described in one sentence, which Tomasane says to Takuji after defeating him: "Your delusions will be ended by my reality." 2.7. Which Dreamt It? This is the one chapter I keep forgetting is even in the game. Which Dreamt It focuses on Hasaki's perspective throughout the story, a character I didn't really care much about after she was introduced in Jabberwocky. She just does not compare to Yuki, Kimika, Aina, or Zakuro. Sorry. But it is a chapter in Subahibi, so we have to cover it. 2.70. Which Dreamt It Plot Recap. After an excerpt from the Tractatus, Hasaki talks to the master about how cold Tomasane is. Can't blame him for for the curse put on him years ago after the incident. A few days later, she meets Kimura, who is investigating Takuji. He gives a recap. 2 students died, Shiroyama and Zakuro. Takuji has been using their deaths to propagate the end of the world through the school forums. They sleep, and after hitting on Hasaki, Kimura has some new info. He basically saw 2 girls who used to bully Zakuro pick something up from where she died. And that's it. The master and Hasaki were disappointed as Kimura tries flirting with Hasaki again. He follows Hasaki to the White Lotus apartments with her mother, and suddenly Takuji shows up. But he is Yuki right now. Hasaki explains the White Lotus Association, the website, and her mother to Yuki, but also asks if she likes her childhood friends, the Wakatsuki sisters. She does, which comforts Hasaki. Kimura was eavesdropping but doesn't ask any questions. He knows an incident happened 7 years ago and is affecting what's happening today. He tries investigating at school but just gets kicked out. But they do know Takuji is planning something. He's the center of all these weird events. They need to figure out more before they can stop him. They think they can find more info through the school message boards, which they know Takuji is the admin of, so they go into his base and Kimura copied the message board files from his laptop to his USB. They leave quickly to hide and see outside a group form around Takuji right after Senugawa died. Kimura became a suspect afterwards. That night, Kimura gives another update about the Kita High student stealing drugs, an order from Takuji, and even though he's in danger, Kimura finds investigating all of this fun. He also saw Takuji come back to their house, so Hasaki checks it out, but once Takuji sees her, he passes out. It was the new Yuki who saw Hasaki as black figures. Kimura comes and finds out about the incident years ago through old newspapers. Tomasane was protecting Hasaki from Takuji in a struggle, but killed Takuji by accident. Tomasane was traumatized by this incident. He denied his personality, disassociated himself, and he mistook himself as Takuji, which is his new personality. Yuki and Tomasane appeared as multiple personalities, but it's mysterious why. The mental details are complicated. Kotomi was traumatized as well after Takuji died. Saki blames herself completely for the incident since Tomasane tried protecting her, and blames herself too for the deaths happening right now. All this tragedy, but Kimura comforts her. None of this is her fault. This then turns into Kimura trying to flirt with her again. That night, Kimura was able to bring Tomasane to the bar, and Hasaki leaps into his arms, missing him, but he just went through a training arc with Yuki and wants to prove his skills with the master. She can't stop herself and interrupts their fight. He will tell her something after their fight, but Hasaki wants to talk with him until the end of time. That's when he promises to beat Takuji and be the one to protect her. Tomasane is able to beat the master and Hasaki comforts him. Tomasane assures he will be her hero. Hasaki starts sleeping and wakes up a bit later in the store, then rushes to Building C, knowing Tomasane and Takuji are having their final battle. But it's too late. He's already stabbed himself. They make a promise to see the sunflower-covered hills as Tomasane disappears. Takuji takes over and goes back to his base as Hasaki follows, and hell yeah, it's Kimika. She thought she had the resolve to remove anyone who gets in the way, such as Hasaki, but she's not that cold-hearted. Instead, she directs Hasaki to Takuji and basically lets God decide if he will act as the savior or her brother. In short, he acts as the savior and sees Hasaki as the Wakatsuki sisters and decides to punish them, specifically Kagami as he lets Tsukasa watch. Of course, that means her rabbit is being punished, but Hasaki is still emotionally affected since it was Takuji's gift to her. Takuji's followers are weirded out. They have to rape and torture a rabbit doll, but they do it. The very next scene, Takuji's lying down, grieving at the ripped up doll, the doll he just destroyed. He brings it home while reminiscing about her childhood, but Hasaki recognizes it's her past with him. When Hasaki tried running over the hill of sunflowers to find their father's soul, but started crying when realizing how big the world is, that's when Takuji found her. Takuji meets an old lady who is weirded out by him, and Hasaki is frustrated with him as well. He screams and passes out at the sight of Hasaki. The next scene, Ayana appears to lead her to the Nth Sky, which will start the cyclical rebirth. He sees Takuji about to fall off, and Hasaki runs after him to catch his fall. And that's the end of Which Dreamt It. 2.71. What is my opinion on Which Dreamt It? Not that positive. I sometimes think it's not a chapter that really even belongs in Subahibi, but whenever I think it could be skipped or removed from the game, it feels weird without it as well, because it does give character to Hasaki, who is a major part of the last half of Subahibi. Still, I think comparing Which Dreamt It to every other chapter, this one is obviously lacking. It's not remotely in the same league as It's My Own Invention or Looking Glass and Sex, and the other chapters had such a strong emotional core. Each one had their own unique perspective, but Which Dreamt It feels empty in comparison. It doesn't help we basically spend most of the chapter with like secondary cast of characters. There's Hasaki, Kimura, and the Master mostly, who seem like sidekicks to the main cast. Kimura is a creep as well. His comedy bits mostly consist of this 30-year-old man flirting with Hasaki, a young girl. So desperate. And the plot of Which Dreamt It is also just a repeat of the other chapters. We don't gain a lot of new knowledge. We mostly hear Kimura investigate something we've already experienced in It's My Own Invention. I suppose it's nice to hear the perspective from outsiders, journalists, or how the public viewed this incident, but it's not really interesting. Besides Besides that, we get more hints on Hisaki and Takuji's past, and this chapter mostly seemed like a transition between Jabberwocky and Jabberwocky 2. But I am really curious what would happen if someone just straight up skipped Which Dreamt It and if their enjoyment changed. Just curious. Which Dreamt It is a chapter that both sticks out like a sore thumb and is completely forgotten. It's one big low light in Subahibi. That said, even if I didn't enjoy it as much as the other chapters, there were still parts I enjoyed, which is mostly near to the end. We do gain something from Hisaki's perspective, which I'll explain in the next question. 2.72. What is the purpose of Which Dreamt It? I've mentioned a few of its purposes. As always, it gives a new perspective from Hisaki, albeit not a super interesting one. Characterizes Hisaki, who is important for the latter half of Subahibi. Maybe without this chapter, she might feel more like just a damsel in distress, but we see more of her independence and her struggles in Which Dreamt It. Speaking of her struggles, we really see what she goes through, dealing with her loved one, her brother. He can't control himself because of his disorder, and I think this is what a family member feels when their loved ones go through something similar. You know, dementia, schizophrenia, like any behavioral disorder, you know, they're experiencing some kind of pain no one else is experiencing. They might not even be aware of it themselves, and you can't cure them. You can only be around them and comfort them, all while your loved one is losing themselves in some way, becoming someone different. It's painful. We see her experience exactly that, basically right after Jabberwocky's ending, after Tomasani dies. Takuji takes over his body and Hisaki follows him. We meet Kimika again, one of the only highlights of Which Dreamt It, and then that leads to Takuji getting annoyed at the Wakatsuki sisters, then tortures and crucifies Kagami. Thank God Takuji chose Kagami. If he decided to punish Tsukasa as well, this scene would genuinely be too difficult to read even for me. But Kagami is Hisaki's rabbit doll as a gift from Takuji, her most treasured possession, and it means a lot to her, so it's painful to see the same person who gave the gift to her destroy it so violently in front of her. It's just a tragic moment how this Takuji does not remember or care about his little sister at all, when Hisaki is the complete opposite toward his brother. Another interesting thing is Hisaki doesn't have the same view of DID as Tomasane does, as like the creator, harmonizer, or destroyer. All she cares about is his brother is being inflicted with a disorder that he can't control. And we see how weird it is to see Takuji flip to Yuki right afterwards. He was just done violently destroying her doll. Now he's bent over crying over something that they just destroyed. It looks silly, but to Hisaki it's depressing how far his condition is gone. Lastly, we see glimpses of his memory come back because Yuki recalls a moment with Kagami in their past, but Hisaki truly knows that memory was between Takuji and her. So it's like a glimmer of hope. A bit of his past self is coming back, but he interrupts an old lady thinking she was the Wakatsuki sister's relative. Hisaki gets mad at him and he passes out at the sight of her. She decides to go back to the roof to save her brother from falling, but even then she doesn't know if it will be Takuji or Tomasane, so she's just kind of hopeless until the very end. So yeah, the ending of Which Dreamt It had a lot of drama and tragedy to it I enjoyed. Doesn't go nearly as hard as the other chapters at all, but this just recontextualized events that already happened. I am a big fan of recontextualization though, so it's all good. The last good thing about Which Dreamt It is that it makes Jabberwocky 2 more impactful as well, which is the very next chapter we will discuss. 2.8 Jabberwocky 2. Jabberwocky 2 shows the emotional core of Subahibi the most and finally gives answers to all the mysteries leading up to this point by giving us a flashback to the events starting it all, when our cast were only children. The major life-changing incident that kickstarted the tragedy years later is finally shown here as well. So, let's not waste time. Let's finally get to the bottom of this rabbit hole. Here is Jabberwocky 2. 2.80 Jabberwocky 2 Plot Recap. A young Tomasane and their father are about to move into the rural village Sawaimura and meet his estranged, shy little sister, Hisaki. Their father's name is Hiro. His wife Katomi cheated on him for the White Lotus Association cult leader. I'll just use this diagram to explain what the family tree is like now. It's helpful to know what the drama will be later on. Tomasani, the rowdy kid he is urging Hisaki to be less shy as she hides behind their father. Later, he meets a girl who shoves him under her skirt, daughter of the dojo owner Yuki Minakami. They meet Hisaki as well, and Yuki wants them all to go to the beach, but they need to buy Hisaki a swimsuit first. Yuki teases Tomasani for being mean towards Hisaki. They buy one, but on the way home, they eye a rabbit, which Hisaki takes an interest to. She heard rabbits die if they get lonely, which is why Hisaki wants to keep them company. They finally go to the beach, and the girls want Tomasani to compliment them, but only Hisaki gets one after Yuki forced her to, especially since it was expensive and bought it with her money. Yuki is swimming while Tomasani and Hisaki play with sandcastles. They talk about Hisaki's family, the cult they joined, and the end of the world, but Tomasani thinks it's all stupid. If Takuji is their savior, then Tomasani will become her hero. Hisaki believes in him. After playing around all day, they go back to the village and Yuki talks about Hisaki's mother, Kotomi. She's part of the Sanami family who's always been discriminated for being a witch and controlling the dead, but truly loved their father who didn't and discriminate her. One day, they get called to the hospital. Their father had passed away. Hasaki went missing that night, so Yuki and Tomasani search for her. Eventually, Tomasani does find her near the Sunflower Hill. Saki was searching for their father's soul. She thought she was at the edge of the world. Maybe that's where the souls live, but it wasn't. Takuji carries her home, deciding to buy her the doll they saw at the store so she wouldn't feel lonely. But it was too expensive, so over the months, he makes one instead, with Yuki. 1 year after their father's death, Kotomi and Takuji come for their anniversary for a funeral they didn't even come to. Tomasane argues with Takuji about Tasaki. He thinks Kotomi betrayed them by cheating on their father for a cult leader and had Takuji as a child to become the savior, but she accidentally had twins, so Saki is not meant to exist. After the anniversary ceremony, Yuki leads Tomasane and Hasaki back to the Sunflower Hill. They note how much Hasaki has grown since they had first met. She's much more social. They admire the pretty stars. God must be smiling at them. But Tomasane doesn't think God exists. If he does, why did he make his family like this? Or why did God kill their father? Yuki retorts, he might have created the world, but he doesn't act after that. However, he did inscribe one command into every person and animal's heart, to live happily. That's why animals are always happy. It's because they don't know death. It's not something anyone can experience. Our cursed existence, to feel happiness only for it to be taken away by death. She thinks about a newborn baby and strangle it to end its cursed existence, but can't. By being born, it's been blessed by feeling joy throughout its life as well. She looks back at the sky. It's a miracle we can perceive it all in our heads. Maybe Tomasani doesn't understand it yet, but she knows why we must not end a crying baby's life or curse our existence. Because we simply must live happily. Takuji suddenly appears with Kotomi. He's holding a knife to Hasaki's neck. He's meant to be the savior, but he can't because Hasaki is born as well. Masani tries to talk sense into them. The cult leader abandoned Kotomi because he just took advantage of everyone. Killing Hasaki won't do anything to change that. But of course they were so delusional, they still think Takuji will become the savior, so they won't listen to him. Tomasani leaps toward Takuji as he lets go of Hasaki off the cliff. Yuki catches Hasaki, but Yuki doesn't survive the fall. Takuji tries to attack Hasaki again, but Tomasani won't let him, accidentally plunging a knife into his chest in the scuffle. Takuji, in his last breath, grabs a hold of Tomasani's skull, vowing to possess him. The very next thing we see is the orange sky and Yuki. Their childhood friend was a flashback caused by Yuki. Tomasani has grown up so much since then, even bigger than Yuki now. Even if he lost the fight with Takuji back then, he still promised to save Hasaki, to be her hero in the present. Yuki motivates him to move forward, despite all that happened. But now Yuki has to say goodbye. She has served her purpose. Even if she promised to be Hasaki's hero, he was her hero as well. She is sure he will live and be happy with Hasaki. It's his destiny. We transition right back to the rooftop. Tomasani is hanging on the edge while Hasaki is trying her best to lift him back up. She didn't think she had a reason to live without him. Tomasani was supposed to be the one who protected her, but she doesn't want to be protected anymore. She loves him. All of a sudden, they both started floating through the air. Despite staring in the face of death, despite his fate, he wills himself to continue living and just manages to grab a part of the building and break through the glass, all while protecting Hasaki from harm. He was in so much pain, but happy to have kept his promise to Hasaki this one time. He can't die just yet. He promised to go back to the village in the summer. He can't wait. 2.81. Why is Jabberwocky 2 so emotional? The first part of Jabberwocky 2 is mostly just having a fun time with Hasaki, Yuki, and Tomasane, going to the beach and setting up Tomasane becoming Hasaki's hero. But after their father dies, Subahibi shows all its cards. It goes full emotions after that. There are multiple moments that'll just make you cry, and it's one beautiful moment right after another. This chapter truly made me care about Hasaki and Tomasane, their promise, and how much they care for each other. Such a great representation of a close familial connection. It's childish, but because of that, it's pure and innocent and cute. It's just heartbreaking to see it all get torn apart after their father dies and their mother becoming part of a cult as well. When I first read this chapter, I thought it was nice seeing the events that transpired, the tragedy after it, but not much else. I still didn't really care about Subahibi's new cast of characters, but I have a completely different opinion now. I really care about Tomasane, Saki, and Yuki on this reread. I suppose there was a lot of philosophy sprinkled throughout Subahibi, but this is where it actually tries to teach a real-life lesson to players. After their father dies, Yuki gives a speech about the cruelty of God, but also the reasoning behind why we should still be happy in the face of that cruelty. The mental images and analogies Yuki uses are just perfect. I really love the idea of life being like footprints on a beach. There are two sets of footprints, you and God, but when it feels like God has abandoned you, there'll only be one set of footprints. But that isn't you walking, that's God's footprints while you are being carried by him. Because when you are suffering and feel you can't walk anymore, time keeps going forward and life life goes on. It's such a beautiful sentiment. The whole live happily dialogue never fails to make me teary-eyed. After this, the tragedy happens. Tomasane gets hospitalized and we see Yuki saying goodbye, also a cry-worthy moment. She comments on how much he has grown since they were children, Tomasane being her hero and thus being as far as they walk together. And even after this, we see the scene where Hisaki saves Tomasane. A miracle. Tomasane's personality resurfaced. She doesn't want to be protected anymore. She just loves him and doesn't want to let go no matter what. She doesn't want to live without him, but with all her strength, she's struggling to pull him back up with her weak body. But beyond all odds, against God's will, Tomasane, as hard as he can, tries to save himself and Hisaki to continue living. Their love for each other was just so strong. So yeah, I cried like 3 times consecutively. The ending to Jabberwocky 2 is so good. Possibly the peak of Subahibi, emotion-wise. 2.82. Did Takuji possess Tomasane, or was Takuji's personality created by DID? So there's 2 possible theories going around that explain Tomasane's split personality. One is that Takuji possessed Tomasane, or Takuji's personality emerged from his DID. After the incident, it seems like Takuji inserted his soul into Tomasane, so that leans into the possession more. But that's more so if you believe if souls are real. It's more of a supernatural answer. At the same time, though, Subahibi is a work of fiction, so a supernatural answer is possible anyways. A scientific answer would be Tomasane has DID and the rest of Subahibi's world takes place in the real world too. You know, considering Takuji's hallucinations aren't real. There's a poll on VNDB that made me want to discuss this. Most people think it is DID as well. I also think that's the better answer. Subahibi spends a lot of time discussing Tomasane's condition if he had DID, so it also feels right. But it is also a bit weird his DID personality is based on a real person. I mean, I know nothing about it. It might be possible personalities can be based on real people the patient has met. And I also wanted to question if people with DID can have their personalities meet each other. So Subahibi's usage of DID probably isn't completely scientific either, but I can excuse it since it's for the sake of the plot and no one truly understands how DID works anyways. So while I think DID is a better answer, there isn't one true answer. If you think Takuji possessed Tomasane, that's fine as well. I think Skaji might have added that scene where Takuji digs into Tomasane's skull and pretends to possess him because it just fits with his personality being inside of Tomasane in the future. In the end, it doesn't seem to matter too much which one is true. They're both just equally good answers. 2.83. How did Jabberwocky 2 connect everything together? So what I find impressive about Jabberwocky 2 is that it's basically a standalone story. You don't need any extra information from another chapter to understand it. That makes sense because it is the first chapter chronologically. It's a no-frill, simple story. A family drama where the mother cheats with a cult leader and the father dies from cancer, and we see how it affects the children. But what transcends Jabberwocky 2 into becoming the peak of Subahibi is just the amount of build-up it has from every chapter before it, elevating the simple story into something just so raw and emotional. You care about these characters, then finally get to see the events that explains everything you saw before this chapter. So that's what I think makes Jabberwocky 2 so impressive. If Subahibi is a rabbit hole, then Jabberwocky 2 is the bottom of the rabbit hole. The family drama that happened 7 years ago is the cause of everything happening today. And I wanted to explain how exactly this through line happened. I will explain how it went from Jabberwocky 2 to DTRH2 from the ground up in a succinct way. So it starts with Hiro, their father, meeting with Kotomi. She was discriminated as a witch, but he didn't discriminate her, and that's why they loved each other. She gives birth to Tomasane, I think, then he gets cancer, and she gets desperate, so she joins a cult. She gives birth to twins by accident with a cult leader when she only wanted one as a savior, thinking that would save their father. She wants to kill the twin sister, but in the incident loses her son and mentally scars Tomasane. That was Jabberwocky 2. Tomasane is diagnosed with DID from this incident, thinking he's Takuji and gains multiple personalities. Yuki, his childhood friend, as well as Tomasane Yuki, re-emerging to destroy his Takuji personality. That is Jabberwocky. Zakuro dies, which is in Looking Glass Insect. Takuji becomes delusional after Zakuro's death and starts a cult. Tomasane fails to destroy his Takuji personality. That was It's My Own Invention. And Yuki becomes a new personality who's trying to investigate the cult her other personality is leading, Takuji, which is DTRH2. I suppose DTRH1 is just a side story if Zakuro fell on Yuki in a dream world. And I forgot to mention which dreamt it, but who cares. So point is, Jabberwocky 2 started it all, and I hope I proved that by explaining how each chapter is connected from a chronological way. 2.9. Endings. Subahibi's endings. Each of them has a distinct purpose, but honestly, if Subahibi only had one of these endings, I'd be satisfied. That's just how good all these endings are. They all seem like a meta exercise by Skaji in some way, give closure to Subahibi in a philosophical fashion. Let's explore what that means, starting off with the Wonderful Day ending first. 2.91. Wonderful Everyday. 2.910. Wonderful Everyday Plot Recap. Tomasane and Asaki are talking about their mother. She stays in her room staring at the wall all day. Tomasane. Even though this woman is the cause for the whole tragedy, Saki still takes care of her and doesn't even think bad of her. She's desperate after their father was dying, so she got swept up by new religions and cults. She genuinely thought she could save their father if she gave birth to the savior. After she gave birth to twins, the cult pastor disposed of her since he only wanted her body, and that's why she wanted to get rid of Saki. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. We can't blame her for the whole tragedy either, because everyone involved made bad decisions. Tomasane comments life is a container. Don't let anyone tell you what to fill with it. He's referring to how Kotomi wasted her life trying to appease the cult leader. Tomasane walks outside and meets with Kimura on the riverbank. Kimura tells him his face and name got leaked after everything that happened, but he's not afraid of taking a leisurely walk outside. He'll just live life normally. The topic goes to why did so many unrelated people die after Takuji caused that hysteria. They just wanted an excuse to die, but why did they want to die? Our oppressive society, maybe, that causes them to feel that they have no worth? Everyone at some point has felt anxiety about the meaning or purpose of their life. To this, Tomasane gives an analogy. There is no meaning to any individual piece of a jigsaw puzzle. If a piece is a life and the whole puzzle is the world, what makes the piece fit with the other pieces is its edges, its exterior. So what is the exterior of our lives? What is the limit of our world? The answer is we can never know, but it doesn't matter if we know. Don't hesitate about how you fit into the world. Our words and language is not enough to define the world around us. Kimura and Tomasane part ways. It ends with a beautiful performance by Tomasane playing the piano at the bar, just working his shift. 2.911. Was Kotomi justified? I was inspired to add this question after watching Dead Prez's video where he does not forgive Kotomi for her actions. I just think it's an interesting question to tackle whether Kotomi's actions, which causes the tragedy 7 years later, could be forgiven. My stance is more idealistic and I want to forgive her, but let's make a case for both sides first. My view on what forgiveness is, by the way, is basically if Kotomi's actions were understandably humane. Let's recap what she did exactly. She cheated on her husband and tried to kill her own daughter, an innocent child. This caused a mass suicide 7 years later. In a practical sense, in our current justice system, she would definitely be punished to some extent. People have been arrested for less. And I also agree what Kotomi did was objectively bad things, and that had terrible consequences on the people around her. But I can make a case to justify why she did those things and that the tragedy years later is not completely related to her. I did explain in the recap she cheated on her husband to join a cult out of desperation, trying to kill their daughter too as part of creating the saber which will save her dying husband from cancer. So there we can shift blame onto the fact her husband has cancer. She couldn't control that. I suppose we can blame Kotomi for joining a cult, but considering they prey on desperate people, we can also blame the cult for being evil and forcing her to do these crazy things. Kotomi was a victim to the cult. And lastly, it's arguable if she did cause the tragedy, we can attribute she caused the incident which caused Tomasane's DID and Takuji to reawaken and start his own cult to kill a bunch of people. But she could not have controlled the fact that Tomasane would have gotten DID after that incident. And one big reason why Takuji started the cult was to avenge Zakuro. Her death had nothing to do with Kotomi. In the text, Tomasane talks about we can't blame her for the tragedy either because it only happened after many people made their own decisions, but we just like to simplify it and blame one person. For these reasons, I can understand why Kotomi did what she did, and her actions didn't necessarily cause that big tragedy, or at least we can't blame her fully for it. I have mentioned this, in a practical sense, she would still be punished because the point of keeping people in prisons is because they are not fit to live in society with other people. I think Kotomi is not fit to live in society with other people. She's been indoctrinated by the cult and needs rehabilitation. So maybe in that sense I don't forgive her, but I still think her actions were understandably humane. I do want to live in a world where every human on earth can be empathized with and understood. 2.912. What is the meaning of life? The big question. I think Subahibi has a beautiful answer which can be found right in this ending. Tomasane uses a puzzle analogy and asks difficult questions using the analogy. What is the meaning of our lives? What is our purpose? If we are puzzle pieces and the world was a giant puzzle, how do we fit in? I think Tomasane's answer was, you should just start doing things instead of pondering what you should be doing. I think the only people who can validate the answer to the meaning of life is ourselves anyways. We are the people that give meaning to life, which I think is why thinking about it is silly. Whatever you think is right is what you should be doing. So I suppose the meaning of life is subjective. We might never find the one true purpose of our lives, but settling with any purpose, one we still enjoy doing, is the best we can do. I hope that answer was satisfying for what the meaning of life is. 2.92. Hill of Sunflowers. Out of the three endings, Hill of Sunflowers gives our characters the good ending they deserve. What future is in store for Tomasane, Hisaki, and Yuki? So let's visit the Hill of Sunflowers one last time. 2.920 Hill of Sunflowers plot recap. Back to the choice in the bath, Hasaki asks what she is to Tomasane. She isn't just his little sister, but someone to protect as well. That's not the only difference. You get a H scene with Yuki later before she disappears. Fun. After the ending of Jabberwocky 2 reminding us of the promise they would go back to Sawaimura village in the summer, they actually do that with the master and Kimura. They give an update about Tomasane's situation. He's healthy now and doesn't experience any mental problems, so they let him go, basically. At the dojo, they meet Yuki somehow. They all walk the hill of sunflowers, comparing their relatively smaller size to how much they've grown since they were kids. They do mention the elephant in the room. Yuki can't stay here forever. She's going to disappear from Tomasane's mind one day. Hasaki interrupts and finds a field of clovers. Yuki's excited to find a 4-leaf clover. Tomasane helps find one, but doesn't really know why they are doing it. They stay until the sun sets when Yuki finally finds one. She's happy she has found one, but once it's found, the game is over. The game has to end. Yuki is hinting she's about to disappear, and says, "It's almost time." The camera zooms into the setting sun. The screen turns black, but Yuki is still there. Surprise. They all walk home, and while clinging onto Tomasane trying to see who he likes better. There's a lot of points towards Yuki. She only exists in Tomasane's head, is physically mature, and has slept with him before, to which Hasaki jokingly retorts, maybe she should disappear. After that point, Yuki hasn't disappeared. They just continue with their lives, and that's the end. This is my least favorite ending, but I still enjoyed it. We get one final comedic moment between Tomasane and the two sisters, basically. It's more of a grounded ending for what their lives would be like after Subahibi, instead of the philosophical endings of Wonderful Everyday and Ensky 2, but there's still something I wanted to talk about. 2.921. What does the 4-leaf clover represent? In this ending, for some reason, they spend the afternoon trying to find a 4-leaf clover. Tomasane doesn't understand why. After they do, Yuki explains people do it because a 4-leaf clover promises happiness. I think this whole game is a metaphor. The 4-leaf clover representing happiness, and trying to find it is life, basically. Ultimately, I think the game of trying to find a 4-leaf clover is a microcosm of what life is. In the game, happiness is turned into a physical object, a 4-leaf clover, and we are actively searching for it. But in real life, happiness is not physical, and we cannot actively search for happiness, only fulfilling actions that cause happiness. Finding the clover gives happiness, but the journey to find the clover is fun in itself, and sometimes it's best we never find the 4-leaf clover. An example I can think of is billionaires who have a trend of being depressed. They have metaphorically found the 4-leaf clover. They think being financially successful, having the agency to do anything with that amount of money gives them happiness, but the journey to become rich is more important. So I just think people should never be complacent, even after they reach their goals. They should always keep giving goals to themselves, more things to be motivated by and reach for, so they keep on having reason to live on in this world. 2.93. Ensky 2. Here it is, the big one, the grand mindfuck at the end of Subahibi. It is utterly cruel right after the story ends. Subahibi still throws a curveball like Ensky 2. The ending that gives more questions than answers, making Subahibi only that much more thought-provoking and meaningful. Let's get straight into it and meet Aina at the rooftop one last time. 2.930 Ensky 2 Plot Recap. In the bath again, Tomasane doesn't care about Hasaki's question, pushes her away and leaves the bath. Straight after Jabberwocky 2, we awaken as Yuki on the rooftop with Aina. She's confused why she's even here. She asks what happened to Tomasane, and Aina makes the hypothesis that if Yuki is alive, he must be too. But Tomasane suffered a serious injury, so Yuki should have awoken in a hospital room next to him as well. So, hypothesis 2, Yuki is not a result from his DID. She has the same soul as the real Yuki, so which situation does Yuki prefer? But Yuki doesn't think it's a matter of preference. Another hypothesis, she's just a figment of Aina's imagination. Her thoughts are Yuki's thoughts. Yuki wants to know what happened after everything that happened here. Aina simply tells her to open the door and to go into the outside world. Yuki asks, so was that her last hypothesis? Well, she can make as many as she wants. Yuki asks, where did the name Ensky come from? Aina mentions the spirit room, the date 1999, which Yuki remembers. But how could she know that? Aina hypothesizes this is all still a dream, the same one where she got dragged into Zakuro's death in DTRH. Either that, or those memories are fake. Aina mentions all the Yukis that exist in the different chapters, but Yuki simply thinks she is just her. Yuki is just Yuki. Then Aina makes her final hypothesis, that every existence was created by one soul, the endless reincarnation of one soul. All the Yukis and every other character was just one soul. While Yuki thinks it's ridiculous, they would explain how people can understand each other. You can only imagine another's pain by having experienced the same pain yourself. This ubiquitous transmigration of souls explains everything Yuki found incomprehensible. At what point did this whole process begin, and what does it mean if it's true? Even with all those questions, maybe this explanation is the most preferable. The world must have reset countless times, and the person I call me must have experienced the same things over and over again. All of a sudden, a classmate was calling her name. it's Miyu. They're missing the graduation ceremony. Aina comments it just ended, but it's going to begin again. Last thing she said is, let's go to the point where it all began. 2.931. There is no answer. So before anything else, there is no answers given in N-Sky 2. I would say it's simply a discussion between Yuki and Aina about the nature of Subahibi. You, the reader, are just a witness to it. The purpose of N-Sky 2 is to tie up a couple of loose ends that philosophically doesn't make sense, but Aina gives hypotheses that try to answer them. Yuki asks a couple of these questions. A lot of hypotheses are thrown around, but none are meant to be answers, just theories. Each hypothesis gives a possible interpretation you could have, and that's the point. You can have your own interpretation. This does sort of imply no concrete information is given in N-Sky 2, but the next question I want to explore what we can gain from N-Sky 2. So 2.932. What information do we gain from N-Sky 2? So first we shouldn't dismiss the hypotheses that Aina gives. I think each hypothesis gives an alternate possibility until the most fitting hypothesis is found, which is the transmigration of souls hypothesis. I suppose it is hard to disprove any of them, which is why any of them could be the answer. But I think Aina is slowly hinting that she's aware Subahibi is a fictional narrative, basically, especially with her suggesting that the world of Subahibi is not possible in reality. Tomasani's existence and his DID is too weird, so it must be a dream or someone thought up of this world, and it's most likely Aina is the one who did. After this, I want to give my own thoughts on the questions Yuki asks and what Aina replied with. Yuki asks what happened after everything that happened here, the story of Subahibi up to this point. Aina simply says she can go outside. She might mean Yuki can leave the rooftop, but I'd prefer to think of this as Aina telling the reader to literally go outside. After read the story, the effect it will have on you is kind of what happens after the story. You finish reading the story, life goes on after that. Yuki asks where the name N-Sky came from. Aina simply refers to the spirit room N-Sky and the date found, which was July 1999. I assume that's a reference to the original Tsuino Sora, but Yuki got confused by why she even remembers it because that was a dream sequence. How could she remember that? The answer is basically the continuity of memory being identity and the transmigration of souls, meaning the reader. You are technically Yuki. I think the transmigration of souls is basically the answer to everything that's happened here, but let's take that last sentence very slowly. So first, 2.933. Who is Yuki Minakami? This question might not seem that important, but it is discussed heavily in N-Sky 2. It spends a lot of time exploring who Yuki is. The reason why Aina even suggested those hypotheses was to basically explain the contradiction that is Yuki Minakami, why she appears in so many chapters, always in a different form, but ultimately the same character. As a recap about what Yuki has been through in Subahibi, she's born and raised in Sawaimura village and then die in Jabberwocky 2. She comes back as one of the personalities in Jabberwocky in Takachi's body, and then she forgets who she is and replaces herself in Takachi's body to who we see in DTRH2. Then she appears again in DTRH1 and N-Sky 2. So that's a total of 5 Yukis in different chapters. How this all could be explained is through the transmigration of souls. How you, the reader, is viewing everything from multiple perspectives. You are the one soul. Since you are one soul, you have this continuity of memory, the identity. Because you remember everything Yuki did in all those chapters, you are Yuki, so it all makes sense. It's the reason why, even though Yuki appears in many different places, she remembers what all the Yukis see, because you, the reader, sees what Yuki sees. Yuki in N-Sky 2 shouldn't know what happened in DTRH, but we see her remember the spirit room, because we, the reader, have seen both scenes. So the answer is you, the reader, is Yuki, because you are the one soul seeing what everyone sees. What does it even mean for the reader to be Yuki? As I've explained, you're the one soul in this transmigration of souls, so technically you are everybody, Yuki included. Not only do you have Yuki's experiences, but everybody else's experiences too, so it shouldn't be too weird. Again, this explains even though Yuki shouldn't remember the spirit room, she does anyways, because you, the reader, remembers. 2.934. What is the ubiquitous transmigration of souls? So this is a real doctrine, I think coming from ancient Greece and spreading throughout the world. The supposed passing of the soul at death is onto another body is called transmigration of souls. Other names being reincarnation or metempsychosis. Every single person all share the same soul. After the person dies, the soul reincarnates into a different person. As Aina explains, this idea would explain many things such as how people can understand each other, concepts such as pain. It would explain how all of the Yukis be one person, and it would explain Subahibi's structure in a meta sense. You, the reader, can experience the story through all these perspectives. So Yuki asks if the transmigration of souls is true, what point did it start? At what point was the soul born and keep reincarnating? Aina answers, any point we wish. I suppose we can use the start and ending of each chapter in Subahibi. Usually the chapters end when Tomisane falls off the rooftop, so that's basically when the soul keeps reincarnating. The soul is reborn at different points in time depending on the character, whenever it is relevant to the tragedy. There's exceptions like DTRH as well in this dream world. At the very end of Enskai 2, we meet Miyu, who wants Aina to go to the graduation ceremony, and she says the loop is happening all over again. They're gonna go back to the point where it all began. She's referring to DTRH1, where the reader starts with Subahibi. It's difficult to point where the soul started reincarnating, but it's really not that important to know. And Aina agrees. 2.935. Does the truth matter? No, not really. As I said, the purpose of Enskai 2 is the question of Subahibi's bizarre, inconsistent rules like Yuki existing everywhere or why the reader can see all these experiences. One of the hypotheses is the transmigration of souls, which Aina says explains everything. My personal interpretation is in Enskai 2, Subahibi slowly becomes aware of its own existence of being a fictional story, and we were allowed to experience it through all of these perspectives. But Aina mentions twice about Yuki's preference for explanations, which hypothesis she liked most. It mentions why each hypothesis is valid, no way to disprove any one. So in the end, her preference is what matters. It ties back to it's all just interpretations at the end of the day. The ultimate truth doesn't matter. There might not be a truth. So all we can do is just have our interpretations. 2. I don't know, Knockin' on Heaven's Door. This is the epilogue that happens after the events of Subahibi, released in the full voice edition, following what happens to Tomisane in his adult life with Yuki still haunting him. I think it's a great edition, not necessary to read, but it still made me cry anyways. 2. I don't know, 0.0, Knockin' on Heaven's Door plot recap. I'll shortly recap this one. A couple of years after the events of Subahibi, Tomisane is heading to work while Yuki is fixing up his tie. Yuki is still a ghost, by the way, only visible to Tomisane. On the train, they talk about Saki going to university. She's reading into brain-machine interfaces, a machine connecting to the human brain. They have a long philosophical discussion about the nature of consciousness, scientific explanations for consciousness, and the relationship between science and philosophy, among other things. Later, once they arrive at his workplace, Yuki is still bothering Tomisane. They have another long talk about Yuki's father, how he becomes a professional martial artist to a homosexual bar owner. They talk about the elephant in the room. Yuki keeps saying she'll disappear soon, but she never does because she wants to stay. Tomisane says he'll get used to her being gone, but also realizes his own feelings for Yuki. They have sex somehow, and then there's this beautiful ending where he wants her to stay as a ghost forever. When Tomisane dies, that's when they finally meet. He'll grow old, but Yuki will stay young and care of him. When he can't stand up anymore, Yuki will carry him. He will have a happy life being with Yuki until he dies. Then he can finally meet the one he loves in death. Is such a wonderful life possible? Of course it is. Their lives were enveloped in happiness. I mean, what can I say? It could not have ended in a more beautiful way. Yuki stayed for Tomisane's sake and will never leave, and covered what happens to the characters until they die. Point is, they're happy. I guess we don't know what Tasaki does, and I wish Zakuro and Kimiko were alive, but whatever. I think it's also beautiful Tomisane accepted death. Looking forward to meeting Yuki when throughout Subahibi they're all fearing death in some way. Takaji mostly, but Tomisane as well. And yes, I did cry at this ending, by the way. 3.0 Post-plot analysis. So that's not the end just yet. Those were just the questions I had while the plot was happening, and there are more questions which I thought was more fitting after we knew the entire story. The first question we are tackling is possibly the most mysterious aspect of Subahibi, a question I think everyone wants the answer to. 3.1 Who is Otonashi Aina? There's a lot to discuss here related to Aina, who she is, what abilities does she have, why does she interfere with other characters, what is her purpose in the story. But before any of those questions, I just want to talk about why I like her so much. In DTRH1 and 2, we see her be more playful, joking about Kant, but still discussing philosophy and literature. The way she speaks reminds me of propositional logic. And it's the knowledge of like studying sentences like he went to the store and he didn't went to the store being the negation, truth tables, De Morgan's law, stuff like that. This might have bored students who took a course like this in college, but I find it interesting. It is an incredible foundation for becoming a mathematician, philosopher too, just generally helpful in thinking about the world through their rationality and logic. The reason Aina reminds me of propositional logic is she tries to speak on the same logic or memory of the other characters, sometimes stating the obvious. She enjoys repeating what they say as well, which is just proof of echolalia and autism, and autism is very cool. An example, Yuki says, I can see the city from here. Aina clarifies, you can see the city, because this is the rooftop, you can see the sky, and you can see the city. One thing that's absolutely adorable is she thinks she sounds cool when she speaks this way, and gets disappointed when others think she just sounds weird. This attitude of speaking rationally is the only way to properly discuss philosophy philosophy to not make any assumptions or leaps in logic, which is why I think Aina speaks this way. Another thing I like about her is her comforting existence. I'm personally happy whenever she appears on screen because I love philosophical dialogue and speaks about the narrative in a meta way. This ties into her purpose, which I'll get into later, but the fact she exists for that purpose is comforting for me. I saw comments online about Aina being mysterious, creepy, distrustful. It's natural for people to fear what they don't understand. But Takuji, who is scared of Aina, she assures she's super nice. And I mean, she never physically interacts with the other characters except for Takuji, and it's a nice break from the craziness of any of the other routes. Specifically, it's my own invention. So what do I think is her purpose in the story? I would say from looking at her conversations, an excuse for philosophical discussion, but to also give hints to the player about the mystery. Although the way she speaks about it is also in a mysterious way. There are multiple examples, and it's my own invention. Aina hints Takuji is hiding something from himself, and that he is one of the personalities of the DID with Tomasane and Yuki. Even though Aina seems like an omniscient, all-knowing entity, she can only show knowledge the main character knows, sometimes by just discussing what Yuki and Takuji know to each other, or discussing philosophy, which doesn't need a posteriori knowledge. That's why I find her existence comforting. Tsukaji didn't have to write Aina into the game, the plot could have functioned without her, but she exists anyways to help the player, give hints, and discuss philosophy. Lastly, I want you to view Aina in a different way so you can understand her better. In any piece of media, there are two entities, the creator and the consumer, the writer and the reader. Tsukaji and his team is the creator and you are the consumer. In the story, there are direct parallels who the creator and the consumer are. Tsukaji is Aina, and we, the consumer, is the one soul in the transmigration of souls who is seeing all the characters. Tsukaji let us see the perspectives of all the characters through the transmigration of souls theory. Through Subahibi, through Aina, Tsukaji has created this story and is communicating to us, the consumer. Any piece of media is like this, but Subahibi just makes it explicit and much more clear. That's probably why Aina feels above everyone else. She literally is standing on the boundary line, looking down on humans and overseeing everything because she is the embodiment of the creator of this story. Throughout Subahibi, Aina interferes with the story to communicate to the player directly, while the characters in the story are confused by her existence. So basically, Tsukaji through Aina created the story of Subahibi and allowed you, the consumer, to experience it by letting you see all of the perspectives through the transmigration of souls. Hope that makes sense. 3.2. Who is Miyu Iwata? Miyu Iwata is a mysterious recurring character as well, but just doesn't appear as often as Aina. Most of her appearances and her upbeat personality is not mysterious. She appears in class often to let Yuki and her friends to the rooftop in DTRH1 or talk to Tomasane about Tasake giving him lunch in Jabberwocky. But what really throws a spanner in the works is when she appears in N-Sky 2, calling Aina to the graduation ceremony. We have established N-Sky 2 does not seem to take place in the same world as Jabberwocky or DTRH1, so how could she end up there? Well, it makes sense if we explain her existence not on the level of the world she is in, but her purpose in the story, just like Aina. By the way, I would call this a teleological way of thinking. It's very helpful for understanding narratives. So think about where we have seen her in class, talking to the characters as classmates. Basically, her role in the story is to be the classmate character. Whenever a character needs to talk to a classmate, Miyu appears to represent the classmate. The exact same for N-Sky 2. It's revealed in Aina's world she's just a high school student who created the story of Subahibi in her head. In Aina's world, Miyu is her classmate and friend who reminds her to join the graduation ceremony. That's why it feels kinda natural that Miyu is in N-Sky 2. She's just fulfilling her classmate role. Aina most likely was inspired by Miyu being a helpful classmate and just put her into the story of Subahibi because why not? 3.3. Who is best girl? I feel a little guilty writing about who is best girl after writing that section about being a feminist and looking glass insects, but I promise I'm doing all of this out of respect. I can get into a philosophical discussion about whether having waifus is respectful or disrespectful of real-life women, but I'll leave that discussion to another time. First off, here is the VNDB poll. I think I'll cover each character from least to most popular. There's Kagami and Tsukasa. I think Kagami is better than Tsukasa, though Tsukasa has her own moments as well. In any other visual novel that isn't Subahibi, they'll probably be memorable, likable characters, but every other character is just so good in comparison. It also doesn't help that they don't exist. I think they're great as childhood friend characters, a lot of fun comedic moments, and their sprites are also pretty cute. And then Hasaki. I do like her strong paternal love toward Tomasane, her willing to watch a H scene just to spend time with him, and also stating she just wants to talk with him forever and ever made me emotional too. The end of Jabberwocky 2 made me cry as well. I also like her shy, passive attitude in the beginning. I relate, until she actively saves Tomasane. She becomes a kind but strong-willed character in the end. I suppose she's cute in a clingy little sister way, vying for Tomasane's attention against the perfect big sister Yuki. Getting onto the deeper characters, Sakura to me has the most meaning out of all the characters. She represents a despair-filled life of ennui and boredom, which turns into suffering and abuse. Out of any character, she undeniably went through through the most struggle, but what's beautiful about her is she represents hope as well. Comparing to Takuji, who wanted to see the world burn, she was optimistic from the beginning. After she took action to fight against the bully, she did find a happy life. I know I said Sakura has the most meaning, but Kimika just appeals to me the most. I talked about Kimika at length, but she's overwhelmingly cute. She's nerdy, cynical, depressive, autistic. She's everything I could ever want. While Sakura motivated her, she did most of the work to outsmart the bullies through her wit because she's physically weak. That's an attitude I can get behind. Her distrust of everyone until Sakura showed her kindness was beautiful as well. Anywho, Yuki, she is the perfect person according to Takuji, and I can't deny that. She's smart, likes reading classical books and discussing philosophy, while being funny and perverted, and also physically attractive. Her personality is so nice. She's approachable and fun to talk to. I can understand why she's rated higher than Kimika since she appears more and is more like the face of Subahibi, but I still prefer Kimika because she had to struggle and fight, while Yuki is like effortlessly perfect. Personality-wise, I also think Kimika is more eccentric and cutesy than Yuki too. So yeah, I suppose those are my quick opinions on all the girls in Subahibi. 3.4. Why did Subahibi use DID? The dissociative identity disorder is a major part of Subahibi and is arguably the key to the big mystery. But why did Subahibi explore DID? Besides being a good mystery device, who would have guessed the perspectives we were seeing all had one body? I think the DID is another relatable part of Subahibi. I'm not diagnosed with DID or anything, but I have questioned my own identity in deeply introspective ways before. In fact, I wrote a diary about it. I wrote on the front the themes were about identity, personas, relationships, changing as a person, self-worth, communication, emotions, and other themes. I think the identity is a fascinating concept to delve into someday, but I'll shortly get into my own problems with it. I wrote a lot about how other people perceived me and the major difference between how I perceive myself. I wondered if other people think about me the same way I view myself, if there was actually a huge difference. Something that would affect this is personas. The way I act in public and around other people is different to how I act when I'm alone. I do this so I can properly communicate with them because my true self is too bizarre and weird for most people to handle. Sometimes the person I become when I'm around other people is so different to my true self, it's a completely different identity that only has a few similarities with my true self. It feels like a burden sometimes to crumble under that weight of being a different person. I'm exaggerating to an extent. It doesn't affect me that badly, but I can still talk about it, and I think it is the reason why DID is kind of a prominent staple in media. Weirdos like me can relate to it. Fight Club is a great example, but that's spoilers. Serial Experiments Lane, though, the main character in real life is a depressed, shy 14-year-old girl, but on the internet she acts and is treated like a god. There's a lot of comic book stories where they have a human identity but are secretly superheroes. That counts as well. I'm sure the way we act around friends, family, at work, or on the internet is all different, even if it's done subconsciously. That said, the DID in Subahibi is different because it's not one personality splitting into two, it's more like three characters being shoved into one body. I wouldn't say it's medically accurate, but it's an interesting take on DID. 3.5. Why is Subahibi's writing so damn good? I think Subahibi is an impeccable feat of writing, and I'm a fiction writer myself, so I find it extra impressive. So I wanted to dedicate a section on why Subahibi's writing is good. First, I always think writing from different perspectives is a sign of great writing. It proves the writer can put themselves into the thought process of different characters, can empathize deeply with a variety of people, and make the story more impressive that all the characters are intelligent and rational. For example, Sakura is just a girl who jumped off a building in DTRH2 and is my own invention used to start Takuji's cult, but in Looking Glass Insects we finally understand on a personal level why she jumped off the building, giving more meaning to her death. What's even more impressive is that it also took consideration that this is a mystery and that a reread would vastly change the experience. Once you read the story, you become a different person with a different perspective on the story, knowing the answer to the mystery. That's why it is so rewarding to read DTRH1 again after knowing what Sakura went through. All of the hints that Aina dropped throughout the routes are so satisfying to understand now as well. Subahibi accounts for multiple perspectives in the narrative and the reader's perspective as well. The second reason is the extreme moments to show some concept or a facet of a character's personality. There are many examples of this, many extreme moments. Takuji is in love with Sakura, but she's dead, so how is this shown? Takuji of course has sex with her desk and pretends it's her. Kimiko wants to show her loyalty to Takuji, so she becomes a chair for him. Ayumi feels free after joining Takuji's cult, so an extreme way to show that freedom is by stealing a bike from an old lady and peeing in public naked because she doesn't care about what anyone thinks. She's free. It's all these extreme moments that make the game so memorable. Lastly is the multi-layered structure of the story itself. Subahibi Subahibi references Alice in Wonderland, and each chapter is like going deeper into the rabbit hole. This is reflected in the structure of Subahibi's narrative. We have DTRH, which is a meta world encasing the whole story, then DTRH2 giving a mystery on Takuji's cult, then It's My Own Invention who explores how the cult formed from the inside but was caused by Zakuro's death. In Looking Glass Insects we understand why she died, but meet a mysterious character with multiple personalities. In Jabberwocky we understand the problems that mysterious character has, but we unravel a traumatic past, and then who cares about which dreamt it. And then in Jabberwocky 2 we finally see that traumatic past play out. Each chapter gives a mystery, solves a mystery, but gives a new mystery. Even the ending, End Sky 2, gives a mystery, which then the story kind of continues in DTRH. It's this mystery answer mystery structure of storytelling which feels like falling down a rabbit hole. I also want to explore the writing process for how Subahibi was created, but I don't even know how. The way I would write would be to have a central idea I want to express, then the characters and plot come out of that idea. But my stories are always linear and come from one perspective. Subahibi is the beast comparatively. It's My Own Invention, Looking Glass Insects, and Jabberwocky all have different main characters, and they're also emotionally resonant and well written. It feels like they're all the central idea at the same time. So it's impressive Skaji tried all these ideas together and made it all structurally coherent. I can't even fathom how it was done. That's just how good the writing is. 3.6. Was Subahibi Skaji's interpretation of the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus? There are some people saying online Subahibi is just Skaji's interpretation of TSL, but to shortly answer this one, I don't think so. First, Subahibi was created as a remake of Tsui no Sora, not after being inspired after reading the TSL. Second, while the TSL and Wittgenstein in general is one of the biggest inspirations for Subahibi, there were many other works that are also baked into Subahibi. All of these works heavily influence how Subahibi was written, so that's why I don't think it's just the TSL or just Wittgenstein, though yes, they were big influences. But let's dive deeper into how exactly each referenced work affects Subahibi. 3.7. How did each referenced text contribute to Subahibi? So first, the TSL I think has two major passages that are weaved into the fabric of Subahibi. One is 5.6. The limits of my language means the limits of my world. There are a lot of discussions about the limits of the sky. Aina and Yuki mention this often. Tomasane gives his thoughts on it in the Wonderful Everyday ending. It's an interesting idea where the sky begins and ends. We don't see it begin or end, it just always surrounds us. But I think the line could be a hint on why there are multiple perspectives. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Language is the way we understand the world. We understand something when we put it into words. If words cannot describe what we experience in the world, we do not understand it. Our mastery of the language is directly correlated with how much we can understand the world. When it comes to multiple perspectives, the word language can be replaced with perspective. What Yuki sees is different from what Takuji sees. They are limited by their own perspective, so that becomes their world. 5.63. I am my world, the microcosm, and 5.632. The subject does not belong to the world, but is a limit of the world. They are both tangentially related. The second major passage is 6.41. The sense of the world must lie outside the world. I already discussed this in the very beginning. Replace the word sense with worth or value. There is no inherent worth or value in the world. It is ethereal, non-physical. Physical objects in the world can give worth or value, but we humans give that value onto the object. That's just my interpretation of the statement. Passage could be a hint by Subahibi on how to achieve happiness. And lastly, of course, Wittgenstein stated in his private notebooks to live happily, which showed his attitude toward fulfilling the purpose of existence. In conclusion, certain passages of the TSL and Wittgenstein inform the multiple perspectives and achieving happiness aspects of Subahibi. Okay, besides Wittgenstein, what else? Cyrano was heavily discussed in Looking Glass Insects. It's basically a representation of Takuji, Tomasane, and Yuki's DID situation. I did explain the plot of Cyrano, but one more time. An ugly, smart character is using his words to woo a woman while hiding behind a handsome character. This mirrors the situation with Zakuro, Yuki, and Takuji. Let's discuss Lewis Carroll. I explained the rabbit hole-like structure of Subahibi, which is a reference to Alice in Wonderland. I think the Jabberwocky poem is also related to Tomasane's situation. In the poem, a nameless man slays to Jabberwocky. Tomasane is trying to slay Takuji. Tomasane feels nameless because in Takuji's perspective, in It's My Own Invention, he didn't feel like a proper character. He just appears for a bit and then loses to Takuji twice. Lastly, I think I'll discuss Emily Dickinson's poem, The Brain is Wider Than the Sky bit. To me, this poem represents the power of the human brain, its limitless potential for creativity and imagination. It's the same weight as God, because God is an invention by the brain. It also connects to the limits of my language is the limits of my world, kind of both about limits. This poem is mentioned multiple times, but its most beautiful rendition is when Kimiko and Takuji took drugs on the roof and had that amazing night of dancing cows and fireworks in space, showing their limitless imagination and how beautiful life could be. There's a couple of other pieces of literature like Night on a Galactic Railroad and Nicholas Casanos, many others, but those are the main ones that really affected Subahibi's themes and plot. 3.8. What do other people think Subahibi means? Almost the last question. Everything I just discussed was all my interpretation, but what did other people think about Subahibi? Well, I searched searched up Subahibi on forums, blogspots, reviews, and analysis, and after that compiled my favorite ones, so here they are. I already mentioned 2 of these articles earlier in this video. Mayuchi made, I think, the most popular theory of how Subahibi works, their layered worlds theory. It's a nice visual component to better understand Subahibi's structure. I mentioned Rel's How Do You Obtain a Wonderful Everyday, which is a great analysis on how each character found their happiness, even giving practical advice. I think MDZ2 on his blog written in 2015 made a great philosophically minded review of Subahibi, trying to understand it in a structural way that asks questions any good reviewer should ask, such as what goal the work aims to achieve, method to achieve that goal, and the degree of success Subahibi achieves to that goal. Lastly, I found Kaze's post analyzing the role of God in all of Skaji's works insightful and interesting. And even better is that the writer is a devout Christian who happens to know Japanese and read visual novels, so that perspective is really cool. I also want to mention fellow YouTubers who have created videos on Subahibi. First is Dead Prez, as mentioned before, giving an absurdist view based on Albert Camus. It's interesting. Second is Sleepy Crest, who made the Subahibi iceberg in their own hour-long analysis videos on Subahibi chapter by chapter. Then Amelie Dory, who made a video on Suinosora. That's handy since an English translation doesn't exist yet as of this video's upload. Lastly, the one I got most value from was an explanation of the Tracticus Logico-Philosophicus by J. Devine. Reading the Tracticus by itself, it's cryptic to non-philosophy students, so this video was incredibly helpful to even begin understanding it. Shoutouts to all of them, I will link them in the description. There are other interesting places, Fua Novel, Reddit, and VNDB forums that had more thoughts and discussion Subahibi, as well as some other blogs I didn't mention. I'll put all the links in the description. 3.9. What is Denpa? It wouldn't be a Subahibi analysis video without mentioning Denpa. I almost forgot about this topic, which is weird since Subahibi is a staple in the genre. So, what is it? Denpa is kind of difficult to define. It is a genre referring to artistic works associated with social isolation, existentialism, and insanity stemming from living in modern society and the glorification of otaku or outsider cultures. The word Denpa comes from the Japanese word electromagnetic waves because in common household technology like microwaves, radios, TVs, and especially mobile phones and computers all use Wi-Fi and electromagnetic waves. Besides electromagnetic waves, telephone poles are also common imagery associated with Denpa. Both are natural consequences of a modern society reliant on technology to function and for people to communicate with each other, but Denpa is this artistic movement that points out how weird it all is. Denpa appeals to the outcasts of society, the ones who can't fit in. They are disillusioned with reality, usually struggle with escapism, and has a close but reluctant relationship with technology. When they cannot interact with other people, they can only focus on the technology surrounding them, because that's just how society is shaped. When living in reality is only suffering, they run away into fictional worlds and become disillusioned. It isn't hard to see how Subahibi has become a Denpa staple. Its intended audience, as I've explained in the beginning, would be people lost in life, suffering and desperate, including people who don't know how to fit in society. Takuji embodies this type of character perfectly. He suffers from bullying, loves his magical girl waifu, so he struggles with escapism, becomes delusional, and has constant hallucinations. Hallucinations are also common imagery for the Denpa genre. Subahibi's main themes are Denpa incarnate, meant for people who appeal to the Denpa genre. What's beautiful about it is it tries to give a positive message to those people to find happiness. If you want to continue reading about the Denpa genre, I suggest reading this article by someone named Kenji the NG. It's one of the best overviews of the genre as a whole, discussing its origins, reoccurring motifs, and connecting threads between multiple works, giving an extensive, in-depth explanation of what Denpa truly is. 3. I don't know. Is that all of the questions? Well, no. Subahibi is sprawling and massive. It gives so much food for thought. I doubt the questions I brought up is not all of them, but I hope it was enough for you to understand Subahibi a little bit more. If you do have any questions, let's continue this discussion in the comments. I'll try to be active down there. 4.0 Conclusion. Oh my god. I finally finished writing the main parts of this video. I think the past 3 months to reread Subahibi and write everything, starving in my room writing for the past 4 hours, and I haven't even started recording or editing yet. But I would say the hardest part of making this video is over, and I just want this section to sort of be the victory lap, a celebration, just be chill, honest, and talk more about myself. 4.1 What does Subahibi mean to me? A lot, maybe more than I can put into words. Undeniably changed my life in multiple ways. I love it so much I was willing to make my first hour-long video on it, spending months on it, and I'm doing it all over again, but this time at least twice as long. When I first read it, I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't believe that it exists and how much it mirrored my real-life situation. It appeared just at the right time, right after the worst phase in my life. There's so many things Subahibi gave. Let me list them. First off, an amazing experience reading it. The first time I was so engaged in the mystery. The second time being in awe of how the mystery was written so so well. Second, it gave me valuable life lessons I'll never forget, how to be happy while I was suffering so much. Third, I really got into philosophy, and it generally changed the way I think to be more rational. Lastly, I'd say it gave me a career on YouTube. Well, maybe not a career, but it motivated me to make that retrospective and gained an audience. Any one of these things and I would have already made it one of my favorites, but I have so much I owe to Subahibi. People say this game is life-changing. I can sense my life has tangibly changed, and by a lot, just because of Subahibi. 4.2. What does this video mean to me? I want to talk about this video in a meta sense, what this long video essay about Subahibi means to me. Also, a lot. I put so much of myself into my videos, hard work and tears as well. This one feels different. I get to talk about one of my favorite things ever and analyze it as deeply as possible while also doing it in a structured way. This video itself, I ain't saying is like an amazing feat or anything, it's just another long video essay, but I also want to be known as that guy that made the deepest analysis on Subahibi out there. I don't even know if people still care about it, so I'm worried the value of a video deeply analyzing Subahibi may possibly be expired. It doesn't help that Subahibi is a complex plot non-readers might not be invested in. I hope, despite how unapproachable Subahibi is, this video still has value to the people who watch it. 4.3. What's next for this channel? I still want to make videos, but as always, life stuff keeps creeping in, and I have other non-YouTube projects I want to do, but I plan to make YouTube videos for the rest of my life. I think I'm good at writing and video editing, so I might as well use those skills. I want to make more visual novel retrospectives. I have a long list to get through, and I won't die until the Umineko video is made. But I could also celebrate Subahibi every, July 21st. It's hopefully a visual novel most of my audience could get behind. It obviously depends if there's still an interest in Subahibi, but it could also just be about Skadri's works in general. I've had the idea to retell the story of Subahibi in a chronological order one day, turn that into a video. I could also cover Suinosora, or the remake, or even the awful OVA. Of course, I plan to cover Sakura no Uta when the translation comes out. Funnily enough, the Indonesian translation is closer to releasing than the English version, so maybe I could read that instead. Could also cover other visual novels or other media Skadri has worked on. I'm just spitballing ideas out there. Tell me if any of these sound interesting, or if you have any other possible video ideas. 4.4. Have a wonderful every day. I want to spend this opportunity just to thank you, the viewer, for watching this far. I'm really humbled someone would spend their hours on watching a thing I made and hopefully enjoyed it until the end. All I can say is, I hope you have a wonderful every day, and may you live happily. Whoa, look at the time. We've been sitting here for hours. It's night already. Time really does fly when you're having fun, huh? You're going home. Well, school has ended hours ago, so I guess that makes sense. I think I'll stay here for a little longer, though. Well, if you ever need someone to ramble about visual novels or whatever, I'm right here. I hope I get to see you again. Bye!